Chapter 300. Zhuo Jinwei learned of the situation the moment the troops were intercepted. He was filled with excitement and anticipation. Your Majesty should have received his report, right? Pang Zhishi's achievements were so great that they shocked Your Majesty, and he did not know how to restrain himself. He had just taken control of the brave Tiger Army's Tiger Tally, yet he was already able to grasp such a huge handle on His Majesty's dawn. Regardless of how the reward was going to be, his position in His Majesty's heart was going to be upgraded by a step. Weren't those bastards in the Tiger Army not convinced of him? Weren't they willing to go through water and tread on fire with just a word from Pang Zhishi? He was going to show them who was the real commander of their army. Zhuo Jinwei rode his horse forward in high spirits and ordered the troops to wait in place. The 5 battalions, the Divine Arms Battalion, the 3,000 battalions, and the 10,000 Dragon Stallion Army had formed a huge formation in front of the city gates. The commoners did not panic when they saw the troops gathered here. This was because the Tiger Army and the Dragon Stallion Army had returned to the capital. There were camps outside the city, and soldiers were often seen entering the city. However, a situation like this where the troops were facing off in front of the city gates was unprecedented. At this moment, there was a commotion outside the city gates. Zhuo Jinwei sat on his horse and curiously craned his neck to look at the city gates. He saw the newly appointed Minister of Justice, Qi Rugang, leading a group of people out of the city gates. He ordered the soldiers guarding the city, watch the city gates. Today, all the city gates in the capital are only open for exits. No one is allowed to enter. Yes. The situation outside was so tense that the soldiers guarding the city did not know what was going on. They were afraid that they would delay the important matter, so they quickly passed the message to the various city gates. Zhuo Jinwei clenched his fist excitedly. This way, Pang Zhishi would not be able to sneak into the city. When Your Majesty held him accountable, he would not be able to shirk responsibility. Zhuo Jinwei also hurriedly turned around and gave his lieutenant a look. The deputy understood and said in a low voice, "I've already watched the carriage. He's still sick inside." Zhuo Jinwei nodded in satisfaction. He dismounted from his horse and walked forward with a puzzled and angry expression. "What is the meaning of this, Lord Qi?" Qi Rugang looked down at Zhuo Jinwei and paused for a moment before dismounting. Zhuo Jinwei secretly cursed Qi Rugang for being a treacherous person. There had always been a gap between Qi Rugang, who had surrendered to Biji, and Zhuo Jinwei, who had followed Your Majesty to conquer the world. However, the conflict between the surrendered officials of Biji and Pang Zhishi was even greater. Wasn't Qi Rugang here today a knife to kill Pang Zhishi? Zhuo Jinwei suppressed his anger and said calmly, "Lord Qi closed the city gates. Are you trying to keep the Tiger Army out? Aren't you being too unreasonable by doing this?" Qi Rugang looked at Zhuo Jinwei's excellent performance as a commander who only cared about his troops and felt a wave of disdain in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, "Lord Zhuo, there is no need to worry. I'm here today because of Prince Zhongxian's private mobilization of troop." The moment he said this, the surroundings fell into silence. In the Daiju dynasty, Prince Zhongxian's reputation as Pang Xiao was too well known. This was especially true in the capital. This was because Pang Xiao was the one who conquered Biji's capital. In the eyes of the enemy, he was a fiend. In the eyes of his own people, he was an undefeated war god. Because the city gates were blocked, more and more commoners stayed around. Everyone looked at the scene in front of the city gates curiously. With so many people watching, Zhuo Jinwei used a lot of effort to not show any gloating expression on his face. Zhuo Jinwei pretended to be confused and said, "Prince Zhongxian's private mobilization of troops. But Prince Zhongxian told me that he was following Your Majesty's orders to train 20,000 soldiers." This time, there was an uproar. If the Ministry of Justice's private mobilization of troops was true, then Prince Zhongxian's words to the current commander of the Tiger Army about following Your Majesty's orders to train was obviously a fake imperial edict. Many people already knew that Pang Zhishi was no longer the commander of the Tiger Army. Privately mobilizing troops without a commander's seal could be seen as treason. Now, not only did he privately mobilize troops, he even lied to the current commander of the Tiger Army. In this way, disobeying an imperial edict, mobilizing troops to commit treason, and faking an imperial edict were the 3 major charges. This person was definitely going to die. In the crowd, the commoners were discussing. The Tiger Army soldiers had serious expressions on their faces. The scene became chaotic again. The discussion became louder and louder. It was going to develop into an uncontrollable situation. Seeing this, Zhuo Jinwei laughed in his heart. However, his expression was very serious. Lord Qi, you must understand that this is not a small matter. If you don't have evidence, don't speak carelessly. Don't wrongly accuse Prince Zhongshuren. The Ministry of Justice's Qi Rugang was an old official of BG. In his heart, he looked down on both Pang Xiao and Zhuo Jinwei. Therefore, he didn't have the patience to speak at this time. No evidence. Didn't the Left General's secret report say that Prince Zhongshuren privately mobilized troops and then lied that he was following Your Majesty's orders to train troops? You were the one who brought the evidence. This official only knew the clues and came out to arrest a rebellious official. Why are you playing riddles with this official? In one sentence, he revealed Zhuo Jinwei's secret report to the Tiger Army. Zhuo Jinwei instantly felt countless pairs of eyes staring at him from behind. If eyes could materialize, he would probably be killed by the gazes of the Tiger Army behind him. He was also a little embarrassed that he was exposed. However, now was the time to be busy with serious matters. Therefore, he didn't waste energy arguing with Qi Rugang. He only said, "This general is just stating the facts. As a subject of Your Majesty, I must do my duty well. I must not do anything to deceive Your Majesty. Since Lord Qi is here, then let's do things according to the Ministry of Justice's rules. In order to avoid suspicion, I won't interfere in today's matter, nor will I stop you." After finishing his words, Zhuo Jinwei retreated to the side. Qi Rugang glanced at Zhuo Jinwei from the corner of his eyes and ordered the people beside him, "Go and invite Prince Zhongshuren out." Yes. The people who came with Sun Qi Rugang were originally BG's surrendered subjects. These people all had grudges against Pang Xiao. Naturally, they didn't want to let Pang Xiao have an easy time. Therefore, as soon as Qi Rugang gave the order, these people immediately led people to conduct a carpet search and went straight to the 20,000 people returning today. At the same time, among the crowd of onlookers, the Emperor of Zhu, Li Chitian, was wearing a dark green cotton cloak. He hid among the crowd with the head eunuch, Li Guanwen, and craned his neck to watch the show. Li Chitian's heart was no less excited than Zhuo Jinwei's. Since he had set up such a big scene today, he wanted to make Pang Xiao's crime of defying the imperial edict and deceiving the emperor known to the world. At that time, even if he killed Pang Zhishi, no one would say that he was afraid of the meritorious officials who had served him well. Instead, they would say that Pang Zhishi didn't know how lucky she was and actually deceived the emperor. Chapter 301. Ji Ziyu pulled on his hat and hid his face in the shadows. He did not want anyone to see him here. However, Pang Xiao's actions this time were truly out of his expectations. If he knew that Pang Xiao would secretly send troops to search for the whereabouts of the family Qin's 4th young miss, he might not have ordered people to kill the family Qin. Ji Ziyu never would have thought that not only did Pang Xiao not take the opportunity to kill the family Qin, he even fell in love with Qin Sai. He always felt that Pang Xiao was a very principled and rational person. Who would have thought that there would be a time when he would disregard everything for the woman he liked? Ji Ziyu did not know what to feel in his heart. In short, it was not a good feeling. He had been stationed at the border between Taitan and Daeju for more than a year. Pang Xiao had also been fighting in the south for this year. They had not seen each other, so he naturally did not know much about Pang Xiao's private matters. He thought that Pang Xiao would still be the same as before and would not have changed much. He did not expect that in just half a year, there would be so many unexpected changes. No wonder he picked up Pang Xiao's snow-white beloved horse. It turned out that there were times when he was willing to give such a good Fergana horse to a woman. Now, in order to search for this woman, he had committed such a great crime and given Your Majesty such a great opportunity. Yes, Ji Ziyu concluded that Pang Xiao had indeed brought the Tiger Army out of the city to search for her. Your Majesty also seemed to have concluded this point and ordered him to arrange for the Dragon Stallion army to hold the line. This time, he planned to make a move against Pang Xiao and completely weaken him. They were usually very careful in their actions because in terms of merit, he was on par with Pang Xiao. He could understand Pang Xiao's difficulties. He had to carefully plan and sell his mistake to the emperor in order to protect himself. However, Pang Xiao, who was always calm and scheming, did not care about his own safety for a woman. As Ji Ziyu thought about this, his fists under the cloak gradually clenched. He did not know what he was feeling. Was he angry that Pang Xiao did not take revenge for his father? Was he angry that Pang Xiao did not know the severity of the situation because of a woman? Or was he angry that he had caused a series of troubles for Pang Xiao after charging into the Dayan's troops who surrendered? He could not distinguish his emotions, but he was so irritated that he wanted to kill someone. At the same time, a group of peoples. Prince Zhongxian, you still don't want to get out of the carriage to accept your punishment? Qi Rugang and Zhuo Jinwei approached the carriage one after the other. The onlookers and the Tiger Army, including Li Qitian, Li Guanwen, and Ji Ziyu, all looked at the carriage. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, and a stooped old man in his 70s with white hair and beard stepped out of the carriage, trembling. Following him was a little girl wearing a pink-lined jacket, and her hair was combed into a double-ringed bun. The old man put a wooden stool in front of the carriage. The crowd was in an uproar. Prince Zhongshuan was a man. Did he need a stool to get out of the carriage? At this moment, the dark blue cotton curtain was lifted by a white jade-like hand. The first thing the crowd saw was a young woman with long black hair and a gentle silhouette as she got out of the carriage with her head lowered. She helped the little girl get out of the carriage, and the crowd quieted down again. It was a beautiful girl wearing a light green dress and a snow-white fox fur coat. She was wearing a white fox and ruby rabbit. She stood in the crowd, somewhat at a loss as to what to do. Her pair of bright almond eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist due to the shock. Her slender fingers, as white as jade, straightened the fur collar and lowered her head. Half of her face was hidden in the snow-white fur collar. Under the winter sun, her white skin reflected the snow-white collar, making her entire body glow. Her light green dress brought a touch of spring to the grey winter. It was so bright that it made people's hearts tremble. Li Qitian, who was in the crowd, narrowed his eyes. Head eunuch Li Guanwen opened his mouth in shock. He didn't even realize that he was sucking in a mouthful of cold air. Ji Ziyu was expressionless, but his peach blossom eyes flashed. There seemed to be a voice in his heart saying, "She is the fourth miss of the family Qin family." Qi Rugang and Zhuo Jinwei, who were close by, were dumbfounded. On the other hand, the Tiger Army soldiers nearby were calmer. They had all seen the Qin Yining family before and knew that this was Wang Yi's future wife. Xie Yu was now disguised as an old woman in her 70s. She trembled as she came forward and saluted Zhuo Jinwei in a hoarse voice. "General Zhuo, you are different from what our leader said. Didn't you say that you were going to escort my miss back to the capital? Why didn't you let my miss enter the capital and even ask her to come out of the carriage?" Zhuo Jinwei said blankly, "Who are you? When have I seen you before?" Xie Yu immediately said angrily, "Official Zhuo, you are wrong. Although our Dayan has pledged allegiance to Daeju, my miss is still the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Anping family Qin. Grand Preceptor Qin was once a famous official of the Yang dynasty. What do you mean by denying it like this?" You. Zhuo Jinwei couldn't wrap his head around this and immediately felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly asked his trusted aide, "What's going on? Isn't the Prince Zhongshiren in the carriage? How did you guard it?" The deputy general was also dumbfounded. My lord, please calm down. This subordinate has been carefully watching this carriage the entire time. Not to mention a person, even a sparrow didn't have the chance to fly around. This carriage is indeed Prince Zhongshan." Qin Yining frowned slightly. Her voice was gentle, but there was a hint of anger. "Where did this come from? I have been in this carriage the entire time. Other than my family members who are over 70 years old, there was only my 8-year-old servant girl. How could there be another man?" Qin Yining angrily glared at Zhuo Jinwei and sternly reprimanded him. Officials were. I was originally grateful to you for saving my life. You also promised me that you would continue to search for my father and my lost family members. I also promised to introduce you to my father. But now, you're slandering me in front of so many people. What is the meaning of this? We Dayan have pledged allegiance to Daju and your majesty because your majesty is a wise ruler. I didn't expect that under a wise ruler, there would be someone like officials were who would go back on his words. This has really opened my eyes. Qin Yining's words were reasonable and convincing, and the amount of information she had was too much. The crowd was in an uproar. What Prince Zhongshiren privately mobilized troops? What Prince Zhongshiren faked an imperial edict? All of this was nonsense. Chapter 302. In the crowd, Li Qitian frowned and looked at Zhuo Jinwei suspiciously. Zhuo Jinwei was the Minister of War and the Commander-in-Chief of the Tiger Army. He had a large number of soldiers under his command. It was inevitable that he would want to monopolize power. However, would Zhuo Jinwei have the guts to frame Pang Zhishi for his own personal gain? At this moment, Li Qitian didn't know who he should believe. Meanwhile, Qin Yining was still trying his best to make Zhuo Jinwei the scapegoat. Master Zhuo, you said that you wanted me to recommend my father before recommending the county king of Yang. Now that I see how you are behaving, let's forget about it. My father is a man of honor and does not want to be associated with villains. If Zhuo Jinwei still didn't realize that he had been tricked, then he would really be a fool. He was so angry that he stomped his feet and pointed at Qin Yining's nose. You are slandering me. Where did you come from? How dare you pretend to be someone from the Yang dynasty? How dare you make such irresponsible remarks? When did I do such a thing? I did not save you at all. Qin Yining frowned at her yelling. He turned around and looked at the people from the Yang dynasty who had been rescued by the Tiger Army. He did not say anything. However, her unyielding attitude was telling everyone that Zhuo Jinwei was lying. Qia Yu had been watching the show for a long time and understood that Zhuo Jinwei had set a trap for your majesty. He went up to check the carriage angrily and did not see Pang Xiao. He confirmed loudly, "Did you search carefully? Prince Zhongshiren is not in the group." "Yes, Master." A few young men in the Tiger Army who were close to Pang Xiao and had the opportunity to enter Jinghu Wei understood. One of them muttered in a voice that was neither too loud nor too soft. "This is strange. Prince Zhongshiren has removed his tiger tally. I heard that he is sick. He should be recuperating in the prince's mansion. Why are you in the army?" "That's right. Is Master Zhuo confused?" Master Zhuo was indeed confused. He couldn't figure out why a man would disappear. When he got on the bus, he was still a big man. When he got off the bus, he had turned into this delicate little lady in front of him. The hair on his back stood on end, and cold sweat slid down his forehead. There were only two contents in his secret report. The first one was about participating in Pang Zhishi's private mobilization of troops. The second one was about participating in Pang Zhishi's false imperial edict. Right now, the 20,000 Tiger Army soldiers were blocked outside the door by the Divine Arms Battalion, the 5 Armies Battalion, the 3,000 Armies Battalion, and the 10,000 Dragon Stallion Army soldiers. Furthermore, even the Minister of Justice had brought people over to say that they could only leave and not enter. From this, one could see that this huge change was arranged by Your Majesty. The reason why His Majesty made such arrangements was because he believed in his secret report. He planned to use the mistake of Dusk's Dawn to capture him in front of everyone. But in reality, things had gone completely off track for some reason. Pang Zhishi had disappeared. Your Majesty had messed up this matter. Would he swallow him alive? In the crowd, Li Qitian's frown deepened. Ji Zheyu, on the other hand, was sizing up Qin Yining for the first time. A lady in her boudoir was actually able to speak reasonably in public without showing any fear. She was able to completely remove Pang Zhishi's responsibility and throw the blame to someone else. This lady was indeed not simple. Everyone had their own thoughts. The Tiger Army was fine. Due to the strict military rules, they were not allowed to whisper when they were in formation. Thus, no one spoke at this moment. However, the surrounding commoners did not care about this. Everyone gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and discussed endlessly. They were all guessing if Your Majesty wanted to get rid of Pang Zhishi. Some people with political insight even guessed if Your Majesty wanted to get rid of the people who contributed to the founding of the country. When Li Chitian heard these discussions, it was like a slap to his face. He was not a fatuous ruler. He was a wise ruler. He would never do something like putting away the bow after the birds were done, at least not on the surface. This was because he would not allow the history books to record him in such an unsightly manner. However, with the discussions around him, the commoners' various guesses became more and more intense. It was as if he had already done something wrong. All of this was caused by that bastard surnamed Zhu's secret report. Just as the situation was in a deadlock, a voice suddenly came from the city gate. Then, someone announced loudly, "Prince Zhongshiren has arrived." When everyone heard this, they all looked in the direction of the city gate. They saw a carriage coming out of the city. The carriage had a vermilion wheel and an ornate roof with swaying tassels. It was the standard of a prince. When the carriage came close, Huzi, who was sitting on the shaft, jumped down and lifted the curtain. Pang Xiao, who was wearing a thick fur coat, came out of the carriage with a pale face. He covered his mouth and coughed a few times. Zhuo Jinwei stared at Pang Xiao as if he had seen a ghost. This person. Could it be that this person knows Marrow Mountain magic? Some time ago, he saw that he was seriously ill in the military camp. Now that he had returned to the capital, he could not find him among the troops. Yet, he came out of the city. Qi Rugeng frowned and went forward to greet him. "Greetings, Wang Yi." Everyone else also bowed. "Greetings, Wang Yi." Pang Xiao waved his hand and coughed twice before saying, "There's no need to be so polite." This king heard that someone falsely accused this king of secretly mobilizing troops. They also said that this king took 20,000 soldiers to the Dian border and lied to official Zhuo that I was following an imperial order. This. More and more sweat appeared on Zhuo Jinwei's forehead. Is it because this king has a good temper that official Zhuo thinks he's a soft persimmon to be bullied? This king has been ill for many days and has been recuperating in his residence. How dare you accuse this king of secretly mobilizing troops and plotting a rebellion? Your Majesty took pity on me for working so hard and ordered me to rest. The tiger tally is not in my hands. How can I mobilize troops? Besides, I've been recuperating in my residence these days. Yet, you say that I'm far away at the Dian border and that I'm following an imperial order to train troops. This is the biggest joke in the world. Pang Xiao pointed at Qi Rugeng, "Official Qi, before you order people to act, please do a thorough investigation first. Don't you know where the Prince Zhongshian's residence is? If you found out about official Zhuo's report and suspected this king, wouldn't you have gone to his residence to investigate? Do you need to gather so many people to surround him and make a fool of yourself?" Qi Rugang's face turned red when he heard Pang Xiao's words. He thought to himself that he didn't do it, but Your Majesty did it. But he could only take the blame for Your Majesty. Li Chitian, who was in the crowd, was fuming with anger, but there was nothing he could do. He really regretted that he thought it was a sure thing. Why didn't he search the Prince Zhongshiren's residence? If he had evidence that Pang Xiao wasn't in the residence, would he still be so arrogant? But on second thought, Li Chitian began to wonder whether it was Pang Xiao who led the troops or Zhuo Jinwei who framed Pang Xiao because he wanted to monopolize the power. Li Chitian was naturally suspicious. Now that something like this had happened, he didn't know who to trust. At this time, except for the people in disguise, Pang Xiao had the highest rank of nobility. Pang Xiao coughed a few more times and ordered, "Open the gate and let people through as usual. Don't block the way here and delay the people's lives. In addition, arrange for the post house to accommodate the people who came from afar in Dian." Chapter 303. Qi Nining's eyes quickly became misty from the longing of not seeing each other for so many days and their reunion after so many hardships. When she was being chased, she hid in a small hut that could only fit one person in the snow on the mountain. When she didn't eat or drink, she prayed for Pang Xiao to appear in the depths of her heart. When she found out that Pang Xiao was willing to bear the crime of disobeying the imperial edict and lead troops to find her, She was so moved that her heart was about to burst. However, the situation forced Pang Xiao to return to the capital early and couldn't see her. Her emotions gradually turned into longing. On the way here, she was disguised as Pang Xiao and would often stare blankly at the mirror. Looking at the handsome face that belonged to Pang Xiao in the mirror, although there was an indescribable sense of dissonance, it was also comforting. Now that they had met, her tensed nerves suddenly loosened, and the stubbornness she kept in front of outsiders disappeared. When she saw him, she was only left with a heart full of grievances, like a child who had finally found her home after being lost for many days. Pang Xiao's scorching gaze just now echoed her feelings. Qin Yining couldn't help but take a step forward. However, Pang Xiao stood in the same place and didn't come forward. He even turned his head stiffly and refused to look at her. Qin Yining stopped in her tracks and the excitement in her heart also cooled down. She felt wronged for a moment. However, when she thought about it, she was now in the capital of Daeju and Pang Xiao was in a difficult situation here. She was also the daughter of a surrendered official. Her words and actions indeed needed to be carefully considered. Qin Yining lowered her head and didn't look at Pang Xiao. At this time, Qi Rugang and the others had already arranged for the soldiers and horses to set up camp outside the city. They opened the city gates to allow the people to continue walking normally. As for the families of the surrendered Dayan officials who were rescued by the Tiger Army, they were led to the guest house by the officials from the Ministry of Rights. Someone came up to Qin Yining and said, "Miss Qin, please come with us to the hotel and stay there for the time being." Qin Yining nodded silently, then turned around and followed the man. The guest house was a place where Daeju received special envoys and honored guests. Emperor Ju's arrangements were extremely grand for the family members of the surrendered officials. When they were in the Yang dynasty, they had to endure starvation. They lived in fear and trepidation. Now that they were in Daeju, many of them felt uncertain. They even felt that it would be a good thing if they didn't end up in prison. They didn't expect that Emperor Ju would allow them to stay in the hotel. These people felt flattered, and then they felt relieved. Seeing Emperor Ju's attitude, their lives could be saved. Qin Yining held Lian Xiaozhou's hand and walked to the front of the carriage. The two of them quickly boarded the carriage. When Xie Yu saw that Qin Yining was so rational when he met Wang Yi, she felt relieved. She continued to play the role of a family Qin member and got into the carriage. The carriage set off and followed the officials from the Ministry of Rights to the guest house. Pang Xiao stopped by the roadside and watched expressionlessly as Qin Yining's carriage entered the city. Then, he saw a familiar figure from the corner of his eye. Pang Xiao looked around and saw that the people at the city gate had left. He slowly walked towards the person wearing a cloak, hiding his face in the shadow of the cloak. "Why are you here? Are you here to watch the show?" Pang Xiao lowered his voice. Ji Zhayu looked at Pang Xiao. "Your sweetheart has entered the city. Aren't you going to chase after her?" Pang Xiao looked at Ji Zhayu expressionlessly. Ji Zhayu's usually expressionless face did not make an exception for Pang Xiao. The two of them looked at each other silently for a moment. Pang Xiao said, "Thank you for the reminder. I am going to chase after her." Ji Zhayu nodded coldly. "Then let's go." Pang Xiao stared at Ji Zhayu for a moment. In the end, he did not ask any questions. He turned around and returned to the carriage. He ordered coldly, "Chase after the family Qin's carriage." Huzi and Jinghu Wei saw Pang Xiao's expressionless face. Although he did not show any anger, the aura around him was as if he was going to cut off the enemy's head on the battlefield. It was obvious that he was angry at this moment. They were all scared into silence. Huzi stole a glance at Ji Zhayu in the distance and then looked back at Pang Xiao who was getting into the carriage. He could not help but click his tongue in his heart. If it were someone else, Wang Yi would have already killed him. Why would he even bother with him? Wang Yi and North Placating Marquis were sworn brothers. He did not get angry at Marquis North Placating Marquis. The carriage set off. Jinghu Wei protected Pang Xiao's carriage as it headed into the city. He was ordered to chase after the family Qin Yining's carriage. Ji Zhayu watched as Pang Xiao's carriage disappeared into the city gates. After a while, he also entered the city with a cold expression. Qin Yining's carriage followed the other carriages to the entrance of the guest house. Just as he was about to enter the guest house under the guidance of the officials from the Ministry of Rites, the sound of a speeding carriage came from behind. Everyone did not have time to enter the door before they turned back to look. They saw the luxurious carriage speeding along. Then, the window was pushed open slightly. Prince Zhongshuren only showed half of his face. He gloomily looked in the direction of Qin Yining. When the carriage slowly came to a stop, Prince Zhongshuren smiled coldly. He pointed at Qin Yining and said, "Bring her back to this king's mansion." Ah! Huzi was stunned. What kind of attitude was Master showing? What did he want to do? The people who were just as shocked as Huzi were momentarily unable to react. Was Prince Zhongshuren robbing someone in the middle of the street? Qin Yining calmly looked at Pang Xiao's cold expression in the carriage. His first reaction was that something was wrong. His current attitude made him feel very uncomfortable. However, Pang Xiao had always been very gentle to her. She was certain that Pang Xiao had feelings for her. If he did not have feelings for her, why would Pang Xiao take the risk to save her? Now, in front of everyone, Pang Xiao had a gloomy expression as if he was robbing someone by force. Qin Yining's thoughts turned quickly. He had already understood Pang Xiao's intentions. He could not help but sigh inwardly at this man's attentiveness. You. Qin Yining seemed to have been angered to the extreme. His body actually started to sway. When Pang Xiao saw Qin Yining's body sway, he immediately sat up straight. His hands clenched into fists. However, after a few breaths, his fists slowly relaxed. What about you? Now that you're in this king's territory, you're not allowed to say anything. Pang Xiao said to his subordinates, "Do you need this king to teach you what to do?" Oh, yes. Huzi was still shrouded in fog, but he still knew how to follow orders. He immediately ordered his men to capture Qin Yining. When Lian Xiaoju saw that so many people wanted to capture Qin Yining, her face turned pale. In a panic, she tried to grab Qin Yining's hand and run away. Qin Yining was pulled along by her and ran a few steps. The people behind them caught up and surrounded the two of them. Lian Xiaozhou's eyes were like an angry kitten. She still tightly held onto Qin Yining's hand. Chapter 304. Can't. Pang Xiao sneered, "You are just the family members of the defeated army. Not to mention you, even if your master came, he would have to be humble in front of this king. Do you still think this is the territory of the Yang dynasty? You are courting death if you say no to this king." Xie Yu trembled all over. "You are going too far." She stood in front of Qin Yining, trembling. Huzi brought Jinghu Wei forward and tied Xie Yu up like a little chick. Then, he stuffed Qin Yining and Lian Xiaoju into the carriage they came in. Qin Yining did not forget to struggle after getting into the carriage. However, the Jinghu Wei were all strong and fierce. How could she and Lian Xiaoju be a match for them? Everyone in front of the guest house watched as Prince Zhongshuren ordered people to take Miss Family Qin away. The people of Daeju naturally did not know about the relationship between Pang Xiao and Qin Yining. Even if there was a secret report, it would not be their turn to read it. But, the people from Great Yang knew that this prince used to be very high profile to the young lady of Qin clan. Not only did he support her, but he also gave her a mansion. It could be said that he did everything he could to please her. Now that Dian was destroyed, Prince Zhongshuren's attitude towards Miss Qin changed from chasing after her to robbing her. The fear in the hearts of the Dian people was like an eruption of magma, almost drowning them. Even Miss Family Qin, who had someone to rely on, had to live like this in Daeju. How could they live? Qin Yining sat in the carriage with the frightened Lian Xiaoju in his arms. He patted her head comfortingly and smiled, "Don't be afraid. That brother is not a bad person. Sister did it on purpose." Although Lian Xiaoju was not fluent in speaking, she was smart. She looked at Qin Yining in confusion and asked, "Sister, do you know him, uncle?" "Uncle?" She had not noticed. Now that she thought about it, Pang Xiao should be 24 years old, right? Lian Xiaoju was 9 years old this year. However, she had grown up in the mountains, so she was naturally different from the 9-year-old children outside. Her mental memory might be stuck at 6 or 7 years old. Since then, her intelligence had not grown. She would only call Pang Xiao uncle when she saw him. What would Pang Xiao think if he heard it? Thinking of Pang Xiao's possible reaction, Qin Yining could not help but laugh. Perhaps influenced by Qin Yining's relaxed mood, Lian Xiaoju also relaxed. Even if she did not know why Qin Yining laughed, it did not prevent her from laughing. Jinghu Wei, who was driving the carriage, could not help but feel strange when he heard the laughter in the carriage. Could it be that this Miss Qin was scared silly? How could she still laugh when she was kidnapped like this? He did not go to Dian with Pang Xiao, so he naturally did not know what happened in Dian. He only thought that his family's Wang Yi had taken a fancy to this beauty, or that he wanted to avenge his father, so he kidnapped the daughter of his enemy and brought her to his home. And he was not the only one who thought this way. Perhaps the people outside who did not understand the situation also thought this way. This was the situation that Pang Xiao and Qin Yining wanted. The carriage returned to the prince's residence. Pang Xiao ordered the side door to be opened and did not let anyone get off the carriage. Qin Yining got into the carriage and directly entered Prince Zhengxuan's residence. The building of the prince's residence was very grand. The carved eaves were covered in snow. It was different from Dian's exquisite and graceful buildings. Every part of the residence revealed a kind of wild and rough feeling. Although it was not as detailed as Dian's gardens, it had a different kind of beauty. Qin Yining looked out through the cracks in the carriage window. In just a short time on the way to the guest room, he was already shocked by the spaciousness of Prince Zhengxian's residence. Such a large residence could not have been built in 1 or 2 years. Presumably, this was the residence of one of the princes of BG. After Diaju was founded, did Li Qitian directly give this place to Pang Xiao to live in? Qin Yining was lost in his thoughts and did not notice that the carriage was slowly coming to a stop. The curtain of the carriage was pushed open. Before Qin Yining could react, he was pulled into a broad and familiar embrace. Lian Xiaoju was shocked. She quickly pushed away the lecher who dared to bully Qin Yining and shouted, "Bad guy, go away, bad guy." Pang Xiao, however, remained unmoved. He planted numerous kisses on Qin Yining's earlobes and neck. Lian Xiaoju saw that this person still did not let go. She could not beat Pang Xiao, so she angrily went up and bit Pang Xiao's arm. Although it was not painful because of the winter clothes, Lian Xiaoju still bit Pang Xiao's clothes and continued to wave her small fists. Pang Xiao was almost punched in the nose. He had no choice but to let go. He said impatiently, "Where did you get this wild girl? How can she bite people? Is she a dog?" Qin Yining pushed Pang Xiao away and pulled Lian Xiaozong over. She patted Lian Xiaozong's shoulder comfortingly and pinched Lian Xiaozong's little face, which was red with anger. She said, "Don't be angry. He was just teasing us." Lian Xiaoju angrily pointed at Pang Xiao. "Bad, uncle, bad guy. Sister, let's go." Even if Lian Xiaozhou's words were not smooth, this sentence still provoked Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao's face darkened. He threw Lian Xiaoju off the carriage and threw her to Huzi. Huzi hurriedly caught her. But Lian Xiaoju was not convinced. She still struggled and pointed at Pang Xiao. "Bad, bad uncle." Pang Xiao's face darkened. He could not bear it anymore and said, "You called her sister. How did I become a bad uncle?" "Bad uncle." Lian Xiaozhou's arms were restrained by Huzi. Only her legs were still kicking. Pang Xiao thought that he was indeed 8 years older than Qin Yining. He was so depressed that he could not help but feel depressed. Just as one of them was sullen and the other was shouting "bad uncle," Qin Yining, who had been looking at the scene for a long time, could not help but laugh. Her laughter stunned the guards and servants of the prince's mansion who had never seen her before. Pang Xiao's displeasure dissipated when he heard her clear and melodious laughter. He could not help but laugh as well. The atmosphere immediately became much more relaxed. Qin Yining looked around. Seeing that there were so many people and that he did not know if there were spies sent by other people, he lowered the curtain again. Pang Xiao waved his hand and said, "You can all leave. Tidy up Su Shui Garden for Miss Qin to live in. Those who have nothing to do can leave." "Yes." Everyone saluted and left one after another. Not long after, only Pang Xiao, Huzi, Xiaoyu, and Lian Xiaoju were left outside the carriage. Lian Xiaoju seemed to be tired of scolding Pang Xiao. She only stared at him. Bad uncle seemed to have also struggled out of the shock of the age difference. He lifted the curtain and helped Qin Yining get off the carriage. Qin Yining saw that there was no one around and introduced, "This is Lian Xiaoju. I almost froze to death in the mountains this time. She saved me." When Pang Xiao heard that it was this little girl who saved Qin Yining's life, his gloomy face finally brightened. He no longer cared about being promoted and said to Qin Yining, "I will order people to take her to a place to settle down. You come with me to meet my mother, maternal grandfather, and maternal grandmother." Chapter 305. On the way here, Qin Yining had been thinking about what happened in front of the city gate today. She was also analyzing the current situation in Daeju. She was concerned about the safety of her family. She had thought about everything, but she had forgotten to analyze her current situation. Now that Pang Xiao had forcibly taken her to the prince's mansion, she would not only have to face Pang Xiao, but also Pang Xiao's family. But she was Qin Huayuan's daughter after all. Even if the cause of Qin Huayuan's father's death was the tyrant of Biji state, Qin Huayuan's plan to sow discord was the fuse. Would Pang Xiao's mother dislike her? Or even hate her? Also, what position should she place herself in to face Pang Xiao's family? The Dayan state had been destroyed, and she had stepped onto the land of the capital as the daughter of a surrendered official. She no longer had an identity that matched Pang Xiao's. Even if he didn't care, his elders wouldn't see her as an equal, right? Most importantly, this was the first time Qin Yining had met an elder, and she didn't prepare a greeting gift. Qin Yining was immersed in her nervous thoughts. She didn't notice that Pang Xiao had bent down to her height and observed her unpredictable expression for a while. It was the first time he had seen Qin Yining's expression so rich. In the past, he only knew that Qin Yining was an extremely rational and calm girl, which often made him forget her real age. Only now, when she was so nervous that her face turned red, did Pang Xiao remember that she was just a girl who had just reached marriageable age. Their noses were getting closer and closer to each other. They were so close that Pang Xiao could smell the unique fragrance on her body. Qin Yining suddenly came back to her senses and took 2 steps back in shock. Why are you so close to me?" When she came back to her senses, she was faced with a big face. Anyone would be shocked. Pang Xiao smiled. "Look at you. Don't be nervous. My grandfather and grandmother are ordinary people. My mother's temperament is even more gentle. They don't have the pretentiousness of those nobles. You're so good. They'll definitely like you when they see you." Qin Yining nodded nervously and said hesitantly, "But I came here in a hurry and didn't prepare anything. It was really rude of me." Pang Xiao chuckled. "What else do you need to prepare? It's fine as long as he's here." Qin Yining's face turned even redder as he listened. Pang Xiao's hand dug into Pang Xiao's palm, causing Pang Xiao to chuckle again. After passing through the Erdawi gate, they turned left and circled around an exquisite garden before arriving at the Chuehua gate. As soon as they entered, an elderly woman came forward to greet them. "Wang Yi." "Yes. Tell old madam, and old master that this king has come back with Miss Qin." "Yes." The elderly woman didn't dare to say anything more. She immediately ordered a young maid to hurry inside to deliver the message. Pang Xiao held Qin Yining's hand and walked leisurely to the upper room of the inner residence. She didn't forget to whisper with a smile, "My grandmother has a shrewd temperament. When she was young, she played volleyball on the river and used to be a bodyguard. She was very good at martial arts. Later, she wanted to live a peaceful life, so she was conquered by my grandfather's cooking skills." Hearing her introduction, Qin Yining couldn't help laughing. "My grandfather is a gentle and honest man. Although he has a soft personality and a kind heart, he is also an extremely intelligent person. I think my mother's cleverness was inherited from my grandfather." Qin Yining nodded and said, "I can see that you're so smart. Old madam must be very smart." Pang Xiao smiled and scratched Qin Yining's nose. She said with a smile, "You don't have to be so formal. Just call my mother aunt." My mother used to be a maidservant in the Pang family. Although she wasn't very literate, she still saw some aspects of the general's estate. If my father's wife didn't drive my mother away out of jealousy, I might not be alive in this world. Qin Yining said seriously, Aunt must be a very tenacious person. Yes. Pang Xiao smiled and said, you don't have to worry. They are very easygoing. Qin Yining saw his warm smile and couldn't help but smile as well. She could feel that when Pang Xiao mentioned her grandfather, grandmother, and mother, there was a sense of intimacy and ease in his heart. After listening to Pang Xiao's brief introduction, she knew that this family's temperament shouldn't be difficult to get along with. She was so nervous that she was sweating all over. Now, she calmed down. At this time, a few soft barks of a puppy suddenly came from the front. She saw a snow-white furry ball jumping out of the main door of the upper courtyard. She took a closer look and saw that it was a snow-white little Pekingese. Following the little Pekingese was a woman in her early 20s. When she saw Pang Xiao, the woman curtsied and smiled. No wonder Da Bai didn't want to stay in Madame's arms. So it knew that Wang Yi had returned and specially came to welcome him. Pang Xiao smiled and lowered her head to look at the little Pekingese. She said to Qin Yining, this is Da Bai. I told you about him before. When Da Bai was mentioned, Qin Yining couldn't help but think of Bai. She felt a wave of heartache and disappointment in her heart. However, she didn't show it on her face. Instead, she bent down to look at Da Bai. Da Bai's fur was fluffy and snow-white. He had round black eyes and a slightly pouty black nose and mouth. He stuck out his pink tongue and breathed at her as if he was smiling. Just looking at him made one feel fond of him. Pang Xiao smiled and said, Da Bai, salute. As soon as she finished speaking, Da Bai stood up and clasped his paws together. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh at Da Bai's charmingly naive and amusing appearance. Pang Xiao patted Da Bai's head and smiled. This little guy is very affectionate. He doesn't bite and has a very good temper. If you like him, you can come to my mother's place to play often. Qin Yining nodded with a smile. Pang Xiao held Qin Yining's hand and entered the upper courtyard. Da Bai stuck out his pink tongue and walked around the two of them. Meanwhile, the woman followed behind the two of them and looked at Qin Yining curiously. In the corridor, there were maids holding up dark blue cotton curtains. The two of them entered one after the other. The warmth of the curtains made them feel very comfortable. After handing his cloak to the maid, Pang Xiao led Qin Yining to the eastern courtyard. In fact, the layout of the courtyard was similar to that of Dian. The only difference was that the Arhat bed in front of the window had been replaced by a heated Kang bed next to the window. Just looking at it made one feel very warm. At this moment, a tall and slightly plump elderly woman in her early 60s was sitting cross-legged next to the dark Kang bed. She looked at them with a smile. On the other side of the table, there was an old man wearing a dark blue cotton gown and a warm hat. He was currently adding tobacco to the brass tobacco pipe. His rough thumb was carefully holding the tobacco firmly in place. Another beautiful woman who looked to be in her 40s was sitting sideways on the edge of the Kang bed. The rest of the maids and nannies were standing in 2 rows next to the screen with their hands hanging by their sides. Qin Yining had just relaxed, but now he was nervous again. She hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. However, Pang Xiao was 1 step ahead of her. She smiled and said, "Grandfather, grandmother, mother, this is Sister Yi that I mentioned earlier." She turned around and pulled Sister Yi to kneel down with her. They bowed to the elders together. "Look, our Dai Fu has learned to be protective of his children. Are you afraid that your grandmother will bully your wife?" Grandmother Ma spoke with a northern accent. Her tone was crisp and friendly. Chapter 306. This nickname really included all the expectations that the elders had for him. It could be seen that his grandfather, grandmother, and mother cherished Pang Xiao very much. However, in Qin Yining's impression, Pang Xiao had always been a domineering figure. It was really difficult to combine him with the simple and honest pet name Dai Fu, which made him feel funny for no reason. Qin Yining couldn't laugh out loud in front of the elders, so he had to suppress his laughter and remind himself not to be impolite. He bent his knees and saluted Mrs. Ma again. "Old madam, nice to meet you." "Good, good, good. Come and sit beside me. It's warm on the kang." Mrs. Ma pushed Yarrow Clan. "Go and sit aside." Yarrow Clan moved aside with a smile. "Mother, you are too partial. You don't want your daughter anymore when you see your granddaughter-in-law?" After being teased by granddaughter-in-law again and again, Qin Yining's face had already turned red with shame. He could only sit sideways on the kang. Mrs. Ma took Qin Yining's hand and said with a smile, "My silly boy always talks about how good sister Yi is and how good sister Yi is when he comes home. I've heard it so many times. Now that you are in the capital, Dai Fu doesn't have to miss you anymore." At last, she laughed happily. Qin Yining really wanted to bury his face in his clothes. She had never seen such a candid old woman. Moreover, she and Pang Xiao hadn't settled down yet. There was a natural moat between them. Now it hadn't been settled yet, but Mrs. Ma was so sure. It seemed that she was going to marry into the Dai family tomorrow. Seeing that Qin Yining was so shy, Yarrow Chungu lit a cigarette, took a puff, and said slowly and softly, "Don't scare the little girl. She's from a rich family. She's different from us." Qin Yining couldn't help but look at Yarrow Chungu. The old man was just as Pang Xiao had said. He looked like an old sheep and his tone was very gentle. However, the meaning behind his words was not simple. Does he hate family Qin? Or was he being sarcastic? Or was he telling her that the marriage between her and Pang Xiao was not simple? Qin Yining smiled and said, "Old master, you must be joking. In terms of status, how could the prince's mansion be considered a small household? On the other hand, the Yang dynasty has already been destroyed." Yarrow Chungu took another puff from his pipe and smiled gently without saying anything. Madame Ma glared at Yarrow Chungu and said, "You old thing, what right do you have to interrupt a woman's conversation? It's not early anymore. Didn't you say that you were going to stew fish for Dai Fu today?" "Yes." Yarrow Chungu got off the bed and strolled outside with one hand behind his back and the other holding his pipe. Madame Ma smiled and said, "Don't mind him. Let's talk as women." Yarrow Clan took a white porcelain bowl with a golden gilded lid from a maidservant and handed it to Qin Yining. She smiled gently and said, "Eat some almond tea to warm yourself up. It's cold outside, right?" "Thank you, Auntie." Qin Yining was overwhelmed by the favor and quickly took the bowl with both hands. Yarrow Clan was a tall beauty. This kind of beauty had nothing to do with age. It was a kind of gentleness and intelligence that came from the inside out. When she spoke, there was a smile in her eyes that were 80% similar to Pang Xiao's. She was as gentle as the water of a warm spring. Qin Yining felt very peaceful and comfortable when he looked at her. Qin Yining took a sip of the almond tea. The warm aroma spread from his mouth to his heart and soothed his nervousness. Yarrow Clan smiled and said, "You just came to the north and it's winter and you're tired from the long journey. The journey must be very tiring, right?" Yarrow Clan's voice was different from Madame Ma's gentleness. Qin Yining couldn't help but smile and said, "Auntie, the journey was quite smooth. However, this is the first time I've seen such heavy snow. When I was young, I lived at the northern border of Dian. At that time, I thought that the winter there was the coldest. I didn't expect there to be a place colder than Liang City." Madame Ma smiled and said, "Silly girl, you're in the south. Of course, it's much warmer than the north. When I was young, I went to places further north. That place is called cold. Yes, I used to think that I was much happier than those ladies who grew up in the boudoir because I had the opportunity to live freely outside and see the outside world. However, now I'm very envious of old madam. Wang Yi said that you've been to many places. If old madam has time, can you tell me about the places you've been to? Let me broaden my horizons." From the conversation just now, Qin Yining could tell that Madame Ma was a straightforward and cheerful person. She liked her very sincerely. As the elderly got older, she liked to talk about things that happened when she was young. It just so happened that she liked to hear about it. This was an excellent way to get closer to her. Sure enough, Madame Ma nodded happily and said, "Okay, as long as you like to hear it." Then, she looked at Pang Xiao who was peeling oranges and stuffing them into his mouth and said, "Dai Fu, why don't you let Yi stay with me? I like this girl very much as soon as I see her. Pang Xiao was a little surprised. Before he could answer while chewing the oranges, the Yarrow clan had already complained, "Mother, I still want to be close to Sister Yi. How can you snatch her away from me?" The Yarrow clan were sensible people. After all, Qin Yining was not a girl of the Yarrow clan. Naturally, she couldn't live with the Yarrow clan. Even if Yarrow Chenggu was old, he still had to avoid arousing suspicion. Madame Ma was a straightforward person in Jianghu and didn't care much about these details. However, the Yarrow clan used to be the maidservants of a big family, so they knew these rules more carefully. Hearing the Yarrow clan's words, Madame Ma suddenly came to her senses. She coughed awkwardly and said, "Girl, don't blame me for being reckless. I just like you when I see you." "How could that be? I can't wait to be happy." Qin Yining's smile was very sincere. Pang Xiao had already swallowed the oranges at this time. He patted the white silk in his hands and said, "Grandmother, mother, don't trouble yourself. I just ordered people to prepare Su Shui Garden for Sister Yi to live in. The matters of the imperial court are complicated, so it's more appropriate to let Sister Yi live in Su Shui Garden. I still have many things that I need Sister Yi to help me with." Madame Ma nodded in understanding and said, "Although I don't get involved in the matters of the outside world, I still know some things. Sister Yi is a good child. You can't treat her badly. As for the 10 people in your backyard, if they can't do it, you can send them to the farmstead." Pang Xiao almost wanted to kneel down in front of Madame Ma when he heard this. Even if there was nothing going on between him and the 10 people, he could tell that there was something going on. Seeing Pang Xiao's expression, Yarrow clan couldn't help laughing. They sighed in their hearts. It seemed that their son was really devoted to Qin Yining. Yarrow clan took Qin Yining's hand and said, "Sister Yi, don't think too much. Madame Dowager is talking about the 10 concubines that your Majesty rewarded to Dai Fu a few days ago." Qin Yining said understandingly, "Auntie, I know about this. Since it's a gift from His Majesty, we can't refuse it, nor can we treat it unfairly." She turned to Madame Ma and said with a smile, "Madame Dowager, just let them continue to live as before." She hadn't married into the family yet, but Madame Ma straightforwardly considered her first. She was very grateful, but she also knew that even if she became Pang Xiao's wife, she was in no position to say anything about concubines. Madame Ma smiled with relief. "Sister Yi is a good child." Yarrow clan stood up and said, "Mother, I'll take Sister Yi to Su Shui Garden to settle down first. I'll bring her here for dinner later." Chapter 307. Pang Xiao stood up worriedly and followed Qin Yining and the Yarrow clan. He said with a smile, "Why don't I go with you? It's boring to chat with only the two of you." Yarrow clan turned around and glared at his disappointing son. "Do you have to listen to a woman?" Looking at her usually cold and arrogant grandson, who was now so infatuated, Madame Ma was in a good mood. She laughed and said, "Dai Fu, come and talk with me. Let your mother and Yi Yi talk. Don't get involved." Madame Ma jumped off the kang and pulled Pang Xiao to sit down. Pang Xiao was helpless. He couldn't push Madame Ma away, so he could only look at Qin Yining and the Yarrow clan and smile. His smile was as dazed as it could be. Yarrow clan glared at Pang Xiao with anger and amusement. Then, she took Qin Yining's hand and went outside. The maidservant immediately served their cloaks. After tidying them up, she also served them a brass hand warmer of a suitable temperature. When they walked to the corridor, the maidservants wanted to follow them. Yarrow clan waved his hand and said, "You don't need to serve us." "Yes." The maidservants bowed respectfully and retreated to the side. Yarrow clan and Qin Yining walked slowly along the corridor. Yarrow clan didn't speak first, so Qin Yining didn't ask much. He stayed half a step behind the Yarrow clan. After walking around the corridor, Yarrow clan saw that Qin Yining was still as calm as before. He nodded secretly and said softly, "Dai Fu was fighting outside and was often not at home. When he was 16 years old, Old Master and Old Madam wanted to marry a wife for Dai Fu. But Dai Fu said that he was in danger on the battlefield and didn't want to waste a good girl's time." Qin Yining smiled but didn't say anything. The Yarrow clan continued. Later on, when they were conquering the world, the war situation became tense. At first, I didn't agree with Dai Fu's hasty marriage. Later on, in order to continue the family line, I tried to persuade him a few times, but he refused to listen. He only said that he was having a good time with his brothers in the military camp, and that he didn't want a wife to be a hindrance. Listen, what kind of words are these? Qin Yining couldn't help but smile. In his mind, he had already sketched out the image of a hot-blooded Pang Xiao. Yarosha also smiled. She pulled Qin Yining's hand and patted it. The days just pass like this. Seeing his brother get married, the head of the family urges him, but he doesn't want to. There's nothing we can do. Other than him and Jilan, the group of brothers who fought together with them already have several children. As their mother, I can only look on enviously as other people have grandchildren. I'm not afraid that you will laugh at me, but Dai Fu's grandmother also said that it would be good if he didn't marry his saber or war horse. Qin Yining smiled again, but in his mind, he thought carefully about the Yarrow clan's words. The Yarrow clan continued. This time, he knew that you were in danger outside, so he immediately led the soldiers out. Her grandfather said that this child finally didn't have to marry a military knife or a war horse. Her grandmother was very happy when she heard that. I also felt that it was a good thing that there was someone who could tie down his heart and make him focus more on his own life. We are very happy that you can come to the capital. Qin Yining's heart was a little cold. It seemed that the future mother-in-law didn't have a good first impression of her. The reason why she was polite to her now was that Pang Xiao liked her. The Yarrow clan rambled on for so long, but the most interesting part was the last part. When she was in danger outside, Pang Xiao risked everything to save her. The Yarrow clan and Yarrow Chungu were actually very dissatisfied. Moreover, the Yarrow clan thought that Pang Xiao valued her too much. For the current Pang Xiao, having such a burden might not be a good thing. As elders, they hoped that Pang Xiao could be safe and carry on the family line. As for who would carry on the family line, they didn't actually care. Just now, when they were in the room, they also said that the emperor had bestowed Pang Xiao with 10 beautiful concubines. However, the Yarrow clan were very cultured people. They wouldn't criticize directly, but would tactfully express their thoughts in their own way. If they had a careless person, they probably wouldn't understand the Yarrow clan's meaning. Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh inwardly. When she was in the Duke Dingwa's household, she once heard her maternal grandmother and her 2 aunts chatting about her cousin's marriage. Her maternal grandmother didn't agree to her cousin's marriage to a certain scholar. Her maternal grandmother's reason was that the scholar was extremely intelligent. The scholar's mother must also be very intelligent. Moreover, the scholar was very obedient to his mother. If the family wasn't upright, then her cousin would have to face an extremely intelligent mother-in-law and a filial husband. Her future life wouldn't be good. Now, she didn't know why she thought of her maternal grandmother's words. She really didn't know which one Pang Xiao would favor between her and the Yarrow clan. However, Qin Yining wasn't a young lady who hadn't experienced any hardships. She always knew that if she wanted something, she had to work hard to fight for it. In this world, who would like her at first sight? Not to mention outsiders, even her mother disliked her when they first met. It was only after interacting with her for a long time that their relationship gradually became closer. Since she liked Pang Xiao, she would play her role well. She wouldn't let Pang Xiao be sandwiched between her and the Yarrow clan. She also wouldn't back down easily. Qin Yining's mind moved at lightning speed. It only took her a breath. Thank you, Auntie. The outside world is complicated. I'm just a woman, so I don't know that much. For the next few days, I'll have to trouble you temporarily. When my father and family arrive in the capital, we can move back. At that time, my parents and I will come to thank you again. Yarrow clan raised their eyebrows. It seemed that not only did Qin Yining have a forgettable appearance, but she also had an unparalleled intelligence and a strong personality. She was tactfully telling her that Qin Yining didn't need to rely on Pang Xiao to survive. She had her own family and her own foundation. Although Qin Huayuan was a surrendered minister, from the general trend, the family Qin would definitely be put in important positions. Compared to Pang Xiao, who had his military power stripped and was on vacation at home with his title, the family Qin's future was immeasurable. Perhaps Pang Xiao would one day need a strong father-in-law. Not only did Qin Yining understand her tactful complaint, but she also tactfully rebutted her word. However, she couldn't hate such a girl. She even felt lucky that Pang Xiao liked someone with such a personality. With Pang Xiao's current status and situation, it would be beneficial for his family if he had a smart and virtuous wife in his family. Yarrow clan smiled and said, "There's no need to thank me. I'm not an outsider. I don't participate much in the affairs of the outside world. You can discuss it with Big Fortune." The implication was that she would not intervene in the affairs of the outside world. She only needed to discuss with Pang Xiao. Qin Yining saw that Yarrow clan's smile was sincere and no longer held any grudges. She could finally relax and nodded heavily, saying, "Auntie, don't worry. I will." Lunch was eaten in the upper courtyard. Yarrow Changgu personally cooked a stewed fish for Pang Xiao. He also prepared a few of his signature dishes. There were fewer rules during the banquet, but there was also a lot of warmth. After lunch, Pang Xiao smiled and said, "I have an appointment with Mr. Xie and Mr. Shu. They should be waiting in the study with the other aides. I'll go to the study with Sister Yi first." Yarrow Changgu and Yarrow clan were stunned. Pang Xiao had many aides under her command. Shu Weiji, who was good at scheming, and Xie Yu, who was good at making decisions and disguising, were the two people Pang Xiao relied on the most. They didn't expect Pang Xiao to bring Qin Yining to meet them. Chapter 308. The Yarrow clan recalled their interactions with Qin Yining and smiled. "Father, I'm afraid you're overthinking things." "Oh." Yarrow Changgu put down his pipe and looked serious. "What do you mean overthinking things? I think Miss Qin is a smart person. She knows when to advance and when to retreat. She's well-mannered. I deliberately said some harsh words to her, but she didn't get angry. She responded beautifully. Moreover, she has always been respectful to her elders. She's not an arrogant and willful person. She also seems to be very familiar with the situation in the imperial court." The more the Yarrow clan spoke, the more satisfied they were with Qin Yining. Their smiles gradually deepened. "I heard that Lord Qin only has one daughter. Judging from her manner of speech today, it's clear that Lord Qin's family has a very good upbringing. I think Lord Qin is also a smart and well-mannered person. He doesn't care about the situation in the imperial court. He only cares about character. Family Qin is a good choice for in-laws." Madame Ma, who was at the side, snorted. "You father and daughter are thinking too much and planning too much. In my opinion, our Dafu is such a smart child. How can the person he has set his mind on be bad? But you two, the girl came all the way here. You two actually deliberately tested her. Aren't you afraid of ruining the Daifu's plans?" Yarrow Changgu listened to his old wife speak louder and louder. In the end, she almost slammed the table. However, he didn't get angry. He just smiled and listened to her scolding. When Madame Ma finished, he said gently, "Don't be angry. We also want to check on the Daifu. Moreover, if Miss Qin was annoyed by Yiping's casual testing words, it only proves that the girl is not suitable for our Daifu." "Yes, mother." The Yarrow clan nodded. Madame Ma snorted. "Family Qin's girl was annoyed. That's because you went overboard. How can you blame her? You deliberately tested her. Can't she be annoyed?" "Mother, that's not what I meant." The Yarrow clan explained gently. "Our Daifu's position in the imperial court is very tense. Although he's a prince with a different surname and has unlimited power, Your Majesty's fear, the hatred of the old officials in Biji, and the existence of the big families are all problems for our Daifu. The Daifu's foundation is shallow and the position. If we can't have a smart and steady girl as a good wife, not only will harm the Daifu but also our family Qin." "Yes." Yarrow Changgu also said, "This is not to make things difficult for the girl of the Qin family, but to see if she is suitable to marry into our family. If her temperament is not suitable, she will suffer when she marries into our family in the future. It is better to catch the source from the beginning. Think about it first. If Dafu's wife is not able to suppress the situation, it will not only be Dafu who will suffer, but also the two families will suffer. You father and son are so reasonable. Madame Ma was not stupid, but she was not as thoughtful as the father and daughter. After listening to Yarrow Chungu and the Yarrow clan's analysis, she understood what they meant. In the end, she said pertinently, your idea is good, and it's also out of good intentions. It's just that your method is not honorable. It's fine to test her once. Miss Chin is a girl from a big family. She's not a commodity waiting to be sold. How can she be tested and chosen by you? You're right, mother. The Yarrow clan nodded with a smile. Yarrow Chungu also smiled and said, we'll listen to you. Madame Ma snorted. When she thought that Pang Xiao finally had a girl he liked and that she might soon have a great-grandson to hold, her mood became even better. At this time, Qin Yining was holding Pang Xiao's hand as they walked slowly on the path to the study in the outer courtyard. The stone tiles on the ground were arranged neatly in the shape of fish scales, and the accumulated snow had been swept clean. Only a few white lines remained in the gaps between the tiles. The thick white snow on the courtyard walls would be blown up by the wind, and under the warm afternoon sun, it looked especially sparkling and translucent. If they ignored the servants who often bowed, Qin Yining was actually very willing to walk hand in hand with Pang Xiao. Didn't you say that you have an appointment with Mr. Xie and Mr. Shu? Can we not hurry over now? Qin Yining withdrew his hand and pretended to look away as if nothing had happened. He deliberately did not look at the servant who was curiously looking at him when he bowed just now. Pang Xiao smiled and said, there's no hurry. It's okay for them to wait. His slightly rough fingers gently touched her ears. Look, your ears are red. Are you cold? This person was asking the obvious. He was too bad. Touching me. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by others? What's so funny? Who doesn't know that this king has taken the young miss of the family Qin home? It would be strange if I only treat you with respect when I go to the mansion. As Pang Xiao spoke, he reached out and pulled Qin Yining into his arms. He leaned close to her ear and said, the more I am like this, the more real it is. Qin Yining blinked and asked in a low voice, somewhat nervous, are there many spies in your mansion? Pang Xiao smiled and said, there are spies in all kinds of places that are not important. But you don't have to worry. I know what to do. Qin Yining nodded. If the mansion was protected by Pang Xiao like an iron bucket, then Emperor Ju would be even more worried, right? He could put in a few spies at an appropriate time. As long as he controlled the channels through which these people received information, he could control the situation. Perhaps these spies could be used at a critical moment. Seeing Qin Yining obediently nod and not ask any more questions, Pang Xiao couldn't help but pinch her face. You know everything like this. It makes me seem useless. Qin Yining smiled. Prince, you have plenty of opportunities to use your skills. You have to rush back to recuperate and pave the way for my father to watch in the future. You also have to worry about whether the elders in the mansion will make things difficult for me. You still have to think of ways to make me happy. Your heart is about to be broken into pieces. How can this be called useless? You know everything. Although Pang Xiao knew that Qin Yining would understand him, he still couldn't help but feel happy when he heard these words from her mouth. How could I not know what you've done for me? Qin Yining sighed softly and slowly stopped in her tracks. Pang Xiao also stopped and lowered his head to look at her. He smoothed out the strands of hair by her ears and tightened her collar. Qin Yining raised her head to look at his smiling eyes. Every time this man faced her, he would restrain all of his sharpness and only show his most special side in front of her. When he found out that she was in danger, he knew that he might not be able to find her. However, he still disregarded the risk of being suspected by Emperor Ju and secretly mobilized his troops. In order to not delay the development of family Qin's future in Daju, he disregarded his own reputation and acted like a bandit in front of people. He didn't care about what other people said about him. The reason why Emperor Ju took in surrendered officials was to balance the relationship between the old Northern Ji officials and the new nobles. The surrendered officials of the Yang dynasty were led by Qin Huayuan. Once a family Qin member arrived, they would definitely be put in an important position. Since Emperor Ju was so afraid of Pang Xiao, how could he allow Pang Xiao to have such a powerful family? If Pang Xiao showed her his devotion like he did in Dian, Qin Huayuan's career and family Qin's development would be cut off. Qin Yining sighed and leaned into his embrace. She pressed the side of her face against his chest and wrapped her arms around his thin waist. Pang Xiao was surprised and happy. This was the first time Qin Yining took the initiative to hug her in front of others. He was so stunned that he didn't know where to put his arms. After a while, he came back to his senses and gradually tightened his embrace. His chin rubbed against her forehead. "Are you cold? Ian. It's really cold here. It's even colder than Liang City. However, I feel very at ease now." To be able to make the woman he loved feel at ease was the greatest praise for a man. His Yi-er was so considerate. She had clearly gone through a lot of hardships, was almost killed, and almost froze and starved to death in the mountains. After she was found, she worked hard to fill in the gaps in his impulsive and unreliable plan. Yet, when she saw him, she never complained about it, nor did she show a trace of grievance. It was as if she should bear all of this. He clearly didn't clear the obstacles for her and held up the sky where she could breathe freely. However, she used the words "feel at ease" to repay his imperfections. Pang Xiao closed his eyes and kissed her forehead heavily. "No matter what, you're already by my side now. As long as you're right under my nose, not beyond my reach, and not on tenterhooks, everything is nothing." Qin Yining smiled. "You're right. If there's anything, we'll bear it together. There's nothing to be afraid of." Pang Xiao also smiled. His thumb brushed against her lips. The warm and soft touch made his eyes blur. However, she shyly took 2 steps back to avoid it. "Let's go to the study. It's rude to keep people waiting." Pang Xiao nodded helplessly. He held Qin Yining's hand in his and used his warm palm to warm her slightly cold fingers. He smiled and said, "Although the prince's mansion is big, the only place I'm often active in is the study in the outer courtyard. I usually rest in the study. If there's anything you need, you can come find me directly. After all, I was kidnapped by you. It's not good for me to go too far. I want to directly tie you up in the study. However, if my family saw that, they would look down on you in the future. I can only do this." When the two arrived at the study in the outer courtyard while chatting, Huzi was already standing in front of the door with her hands crossed. She was almost frozen into an ice sculpture. "Wang Yi, you're here. Mr. Shu and Mr. Xie have already eaten 3 cups of tea." Huzi bounced on the spot a few times and then came forward to salute Qin Yining. "Fourth Miss, hello." Pang Xiao said seriously, "We have something important to discuss. Tell the people to guard the study." Huzi saw that Pang Xiao was so serious and immediately straightened her expression. She saluted and said, "Yes." The study was the same as the upper courtyard. There was a heated kang by the window. The kang was warm and there was a soft dark blue mattress on top of it. There was also a brazier on the ground with good quality silver frost charcoal burning in it. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao took off their cloaks and sat down. Xie Yu and Shu Weiji, who had been waiting in the side room for a long time, came in together. There were dozens of people following behind the two of them. They were all dressed like scholars. Qin Yining said in surprise, "These are all your aides?" "Yes." Pang Xiao smiled and nodded. "Today, I only invited some core people for you to get to know." Qin Yining couldn't help but click his tongue. Pang Xiao actually had so many aides. Chapter 309. Qin Yining did not dare to be arrogant. Right now, her status was just the daughter of a surrendered official, and she was not related to Pang Xiao. These advisors were all capable people under Pang Xiao's command. They were all older than her, so she did not feel it was inappropriate when she returned the greeting. Qin Yining's courteous actions caused the advisors to have a slightly better impression of her. But after seeing her beautiful appearance, everyone's impression of her worsened again. Such a natural charm and seductive behavior, no wonder a hero like Wang Yi would lose his mind. He would rather take the risk of facing your majesty and take the risk of sending troops to search for her. This woman, was it that the one surnamed Qin was afraid that Wang Yi would seek revenge on him, so he sent her to charm Wang Yi? It was clear that these brainy elites had demonized Qin Yining a long time ago. Qin Yining was very sensitive. Even though these advisors did not express anything inappropriate, she could still feel that they did not like her. However, she did not need to think to understand the reason. Therefore, she only smiled and retreated to the side. She was not a Wang Fei, and her status as a family Qin was not clear. She could interact with Pang Xiao however she wanted in private, but she knew that she could not overstep the rules in front of others. Pang Xiao frowned. Seeing Qin Yining being so careful, and seeing the attitude of his advisors towards Qin Yining, he felt displeased inside. Just as he was about to scold her, Qin Yining turned around first. She bent her knees and said, "Wang Yi, is there any news of my father and family in the past few days?" When she asked this, her watery eyes blinked mischievously at him. Pang Xiao immediately recovered his mind. Yes, advisors were not like other people. He could not use forceful methods to force them to submit to Qin Yining. Qin Yining probably knew this as well. A person's good opinion of another person would not appear suddenly. Pang Xiao believed that Qin Yining had the means to make these people submit willingly. Therefore, Pang Xiao put the matter aside and turned to look at the leader, an elegant man in his 40s. He said, "Sir Shu, is there any news of family Qin?" This man was Shu Weiji. He was quick-witted and good at scheming. His cooperation with Xie Yu, who was good at making decisions, was seamless. He was Pang Xiao's most important advisor. Shu Weiji smiled and cupped his hands in salute. He said, "Wang Yi, there is no news of family Qin yet. However, the county king of Yang, the Li family, the Jiyu family, and a few other families have been found by your Majesty's team. They should be arriving in the capital in the next few days." When Qin Yining heard this, she became more worried. Although she knew that there would be silver-masked spies protecting her father and mother, she could not be completely at ease without seeing them alive and well. Fortunately, Cao Yuqing and the silver-masked spies were there. When the incapable emperor abdicated, the silver-masked spies, who had been highly regarded by the incapable emperor, became masterless. The new emperor would not use the remaining spies of the old emperor. Therefore, the silver-masked spies had no idea what to do for a while and no one paid them. Qin Huayuan used Cao Yuqing's relationship to completely recruit the silver-masked spies for his own use. Qin Yining could only comfort herself that the spies were highly skilled and should be able to find her father and mother and protect them on their way to the capital. Suppressing the worry in her heart, Qin Yining asked, "Was this assassination attempt by Marquis Dingbei's doing?" Pang Xiao nodded and instructed the staff to take a seat. He also had Qin Yining sit next to him. Then, he said to Shu Weiji and Xie Yu, "Why don't you explain to Miss Qin?" When the staff saw Pang Xiao arrange the seat for Qin Yining and his attitude towards Qin Yining, they could already guess what was going on. Among the staff, Shu Weiji and Xie Yu were the most respected people aside from Zheng Pei. Therefore, when Pang Xiao asked them to explain to Qin Yining, the staff were even more certain. Even if they had doubts about Qin Yining, they temporarily suppressed them. Shu Weiji also felt very surprised and didn't immediately speak. On the other hand, Xie Yu had interacted with Qin Yining for a long time and understood Qin Yining's character and strategy very well. Therefore, she said with an extremely respectful attitude, "Miss Qin, regarding Marquis Dingbei's assassination attempt on the Dayan troops, I believe that as long as you understand the situation in the capital, you'll naturally understand." Qin Yining smiled and said, "I'm new here and don't really understand the situation in the capital. Please enlighten me, teacher." Xie Yu repeatedly said that she didn't dare and politely said, "Miss Qin is someone that Wang Yi regards highly. You're not an outsider, so I'll be direct. Back when Wang Yi followed your Majesty to conquer the world, he became sworn brothers with your Majesty and Marquis Dingbei, right?" Qin Yining nodded with a smile. Xie Yu said, "Marquis Dingbei is a calm person with a cold temperament. He speaks bluntly to outsiders, but his relationship with Wang Yi has always been very good. This time, Marquis Dingbei's assassination attempt on the Dayan troops might be because he wants to avenge Wang Yi." As soon as she said this, everyone in the room discreetly sized up Qin Yining. Qin Yining didn't mind and said understandingly, "When General Cheng died, my father did use the tactic of sowing discord. Even if the tyrant of Biji had long wanted to get rid of General Cheng, he only used the tactic of sowing discord. However, The disaster did indeed arise because of this. In the eyes of outsiders, Wang Yi indeed has an irreconcilable enmity with family Qin and Dian. That's right. Xie Yu smiled when she saw Qin Yining being so honest. Everyone thought that Wang Yi would definitely kill family Qin to avenge himself. Among the troops of Dian who surrendered, there were family Qin members. Therefore, it was obvious that Wang Yi didn't succeed in his revenge this time. Wang Yi didn't have time to accept the letter of surrender from the county king of Yang before he returned to the capital. Coincidentally, he met Marquis Dingbei, who was returning to the capital to report on his work. That's why this happened. Qin Yining nodded when he heard this. After pondering for a moment, he felt that something was amiss. Didn't Mr. Xie just say that Marquis Dingbei is a calm and intelligent person who is cold to others? But this time, his actions really don't match his personality. Qin Yining frowned as he analyzed, why would a calm and intelligent person take a detour and kill the surrendered officials who were important to your majesty on the way back to his base after reporting on his work? Even if he wanted to avenge his brother, his actions were too extreme and direct. Qin Yining had already heard some news in private. When he combined it with what Xie Yu had said and recalled the scene that day, he felt that something was amiss. That day, Marquis Dingbei led his troops and asked his subordinates to disguise themselves as bandits. He ordered them to charge into the crowd and kill randomly. If he wanted to kill my family members to avenge Wang Yi's father, then his actions were too careless. If that's all he has and he didn't even investigate the enemy's situation before taking action and was so impulsive and brainless, then it doesn't match Mr. Xie's evaluation of him as a calm and intelligent person. Moreover, if he was really such a person, I'm afraid he wouldn't be as famous as Wang Yi today. The room was silent. All the aides were deep in thought. Chapter 310. This was the first time the advisors had gathered together to discuss Jizuyu's matter, so they all had some thoughts in their hearts. However, what surprised them the most was that Miss Family Qin was actually so sharp. She didn't seem like a daughter raised in a boudoir who didn't know much about the world. Qin Yining sensed everyone's gaze and continued, I don't know much about North Placating Marquis, but when I recall how North Placating Marquis led his men to recklessly kill the Yi Qi, there were many suspicious points. With North Placating Marquis's ability, if he wanted to kill someone from the family Qin, it would be impossible for him to find the wrong person. Even I know why your majesty accepted the Dian's surrendered subjects. How could North Placating Marquis, who is in the officialdom, not know? He deliberately went to recklessly kill people and disregarded your majesty's wishes to attack the surrendered subjects. Could it be that he wasn't afraid of your majesty's condemnation? Perhaps I am being narrow-minded, but I don't think that North Placating Marquis's brotherly love with Wang Yi would make him disregard his own safety to seek revenge. Moreover, he didn't find the right person to seek revenge. He wouldn't be so impulsive or so stupid. At this point, Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao next to him and asked, North Placating Marquis is equally famous as Wang Yi. Now, he should be like Wang Yi, troubled by his meritorious service that shocks the emperor, right? Pang Xiao didn't answer. She just sat there silently with a calm expression on her face. Qin Yining's thoughts were clear. Based on her rough understanding of the situation in the capital, she was able to analyze so many key points. Although the advisors present might not necessarily be unable to think of these, for a young woman to be able to point out the problems of the current situation so thoroughly, they had no choice but to admit her ability. At this time, the advisors were no longer looking at Qin Yining as a femme fatale. They seemed to know why Pang Xiao looked at her in a different light. Such beauty was rare, but what was even rarer was that she was intelligent and could keep up with Wang Yi's footsteps. It was inevitable that people would have a whole new level of respect for her. Xu Weiji stood up and personally picked up the teapot to refill Qin Yining's untouched tea. Then, he put down the teapot and said with a smile, Miss Qin's vision is unique and has many ideas. This old man and Miss Qin happened to coincide. His attitude was polite and was no longer as cold as before, which made Pang Xiao nod secretly. The people around him were also very surprised. Xu Weiji cupped his hands to Pang Xiao and said, Wang Yi, I've told you before that Marquis Dingbei's actions are not simple. Now that Miss Qin is new here, she can understand the complexity of it. It shows that my deduction is not without basis. Wang Yi is a sentimental person, but you can't let your guard down. Pang Xiao nodded calmly. Xu Weiji sighed and said, Wang Yi is a sentimental and righteous person. This is Wang Yi's strong point and also the reason why we are willing to follow Wang Yi. However, people's hearts change and the situation changes. This is something that can't be helped. Although Marquis Dingbei and Wang Yi have deep feelings for each other, his current situation is similar to Wang Yi's. Both of them have great achievements and are feared by others. Marquis Dingbei will also do his best to survive. He won't ruin his life because of simple sentimental matters. That's right, I think so too. The rest of the advisors also nodded and sighed, sighing deeply. Qin Yining could understand Pang Xiao's complicated feelings. Out of the 3 sworn brothers, one was already against him. If there was one more, it would be equivalent to completely destroying the oath they made that day. If this happened to anyone, they wouldn't feel good. However, in this world, if one wanted to survive, they had to accept reality. Xu Weiji had wanted to say something to Pang Xiao several times, but because of the relationship between Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu, he couldn't find a chance to speak. Today, Qin Yining's words gave him a chance. Everyone, this old man thinks that Marquis Dingbei is killing 3 birds with 1 stone. First, he wants to express goodwill to Wang Yi. Second, he wants to rope in the old officials of BG. Third, he wants to sell your majesty a mistake. What do you think? These dozen people usually discussed things like this. Moreover, they knew that Qin Yining was someone Wang Yi trusted, so they didn't avoid discussing it. Someone said, it's understandable that he wants to express goodwill to Wang Yi. After all, Wang Yi and Marquis Dingbei haven't seen each other for a long time. Even if they know each other's news, they will drift apart if they don't contact each other. Marquis Dingbei cherishes his friendship with Wang Yi, so it's natural for him to express goodwill. However, as Xu Weiji said, Marquis Dingbei isn't just expressing goodwill. I'm afraid this is just an excuse. The other 2 points are his true motives. That's true. The arrival of the surrendered officials of the Yang dynasty will definitely take away some of the power of the remaining officials of BG. Although Marquis Dingbei's actions won't necessarily make the old officials of BG grateful to him, at least these people won't stab him in the back when he returns to the north. That's right. Marquis Dingbei's merit is too great. He's meticulous in his actions and doesn't leave any mistakes. Your Majesty wants to control him, but he's too slippery. This may seem good on the surface, but in the long run, it won't be good for Marquis Dingbei. You have to know that when an emperor wants to use people that he can control, he will only feel assured. That's right. After Marquis Dingbei killed the Dian troops and returned to the capital to ask for forgiveness, he's purposely giving Your Majesty something to use against him. In this way, Your Majesty will feel assured and will feel that there's a way to dispose of this sharp weapon when he's not using it. Qin Yining quietly listened to everyone's analysis. She was curious about this kind of discussion environment, but she also liked it. Wasn't this what it meant to gather the wisdom of the masses and express their own opinions? Listening to these intelligent people's discussion allowed her to understand Daju's environment and benefited a lot. Unknowingly, she began to analyze today's discussion. Seeing Qin Yining deep in thought, Xiaoyu smiled and said, Miss Qin, do you have any brilliant ideas? The advisors all looked at Qin Yining. Qin Yining didn't expect him to ask her, but she wasn't afraid. She smiled and said, I did think of something. I think that what this gentleman just said about Marquis Dingbei's goodwill is only incidental is a bit inappropriate. Oh. The advisor who was pointed out by Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and felt a little unconvinced. Even if Wang Yi liked this woman, she was still a woman and a young girl. How could she have better insights than these advisors? If Miss Qin has any brilliant ideas, please enlighten me. His tone was rather stiff. Qin Yining didn't get angry. She smiled and said, actually, I think that Marquis Dingbei's main purpose is to express goodwill. The other 2 points that Mr. Xu mentioned are incidental. After all, if it weren't for the enmity between Wang Yi and my father, Marquis Dingbei wouldn't have chosen to attack the Dian troops to achieve his goal. Once this causality was revealed, everyone was really curious about Qin Yining's opinion. Qin Yining continued, "Also, I think that other than these 3 goals, Marquis Dingbei has 2 more important goals." Mr. Xu said that Marquis Dingbei is good at scheming, and it's true. His plan this time is to kill 5 birds with 1 stone. The advisor who was pointed out was very displeased with the way a woman was showing off. However, because Pang Xiao was here, he couldn't say much. He only said with a straight face, "What are the other 2 points? I'd like to hear the details." Chapter 3:11. Qin Yining was deep in thought. He organized his words and said, "Other than giving Your Majesty something to use against Your Majesty, Marquis Dingbei is also expressing goodwill to Your Majesty. I'm sure that after he kills the Dayan troops and returns to the palace, he will try his best to apologize and show his weakness. Your Majesty will definitely change his view of a strong-willed person who is willing to submit to Your Majesty. Compared to Wang Yi's temperament, Marquis Dingbei's goodwill will be even more precious." After the disturbance caused by North placating Marquis, His Majesty could not say that he did not allow Your Highness to seek revenge in front of Your Highness. But now, he is in a position where he can say don't kill the innocent, and help His Majesty to keep the surrendered subjects of Great Yang who he wants to use. The most important thing is that Marquis Dingbei is not only trying to win over the old officials of Biji, but he is also trying to sell some benefits to the surrendered officials of Dayan. Oh! Xu Weiji frowned slightly when she heard this. After thinking for a while, her eyes lit up. She looked at Qin Yining in surprise and admiration and said, "Miss Qin is indeed wise." Pang Xiao also looked at Qin Yining, who was smiling and speaking frankly. Her eyes were filled with admiration. Qin Yining smiled and drew circles on the lid of the bowl with her white fingertips. She continued in a soft voice. He continued, "I'm from Dayan, so I understand a little about the thoughts of the Dayan officials. The team entering the capital is divided into 3 groups. The first group is from 10 families following the county king of Yang. They are all outstanding Dayan officials. These people should be valued by Your Majesty when they arrive in Daeju. However, I'm guessing that the generals in the court must be Your Majesty's direct subordinates. As for the civil officials, Your Majesty will assign a few of his own people to important positions. The remaining positions will be equally divided between the old officials of Biji and the surrendered Dayan officials. From this, it seems that the vacancies are limited. Marquis Dingbei killed many people in the first group. The second and third groups of people from the Yang dynasty will have a higher chance of filling up the vacancies. Think about it, these people will have a bad impression of Marquis Dingbei. You're right. Although lives are at stake and the people who died tragically are innocent, those who survived will feel lucky. They will feel that it's fortunate that someone died so that they could have a chance to take up a position. Pang Xiao couldn't help but sigh when he heard her analysis. Pang Xiao rarely interfered with the discussions of his advisors. Usually, the advisors would bring up the problems to discuss. Xu Weiji, who was good at planning, would come up with a few solutions. Everyone would analyze the pros and cons together. Finally, Xie Yu, who was good at making decisions, would choose the most feasible plan. Pang Xiao would listen during this process. He would also express his opinion at the end, but he wouldn't interrupt in the middle. His actions today were really rare. Not only Pang Xiao, but even they couldn't help but sigh for human nature after hearing Qin Yining's analysis. Everyone's impression of Qin Yining changed again. Qin Yining smiled at Pang Xiao. "There's no need to think about how evil human nature can be. What I said just now should be what North placating Marquis said in passing. Moreover, this isn't the crux of why North placating Marquis expressed goodwill to the Dayan officials. The crux of the matter is the enmity between Wang Yi and the family Qin and the Dayan." Pang Xiao already understood what she meant. He said in a deep voice, "It was indeed Grand Preceptor Qin who schemed to sow discord, but the person who ordered Grand Preceptor Qin to do so was an incapable ruler. When this king attacked the Dayan, the people in the city said that this king was a demon who killed without batting an eye and ate human flesh and drank human blood. Presumably, the people of the Yang dynasty were also very afraid of this king. They were afraid that this king would vent his anger on them and take revenge for his father on them. Qin Yining frowned and said, yes, although Wang Yi has destroyed the Dayan, he hasn't actually taken revenge for his father. Therefore, the Dayan people must be worried that they will be played to death in Wang Yi's territory. Qin Yining stopped speaking at this point. This was because she knew that everyone present was smart. They didn't think of it earlier because they were people of the Zhou dynasty. Naturally, they would think from the perspective of the people of the Zhou dynasty. This didn't prove that she was much more powerful than the strategists present. She didn't finish her words and left them some space to express themselves. Sure enough, the strategists all had a contemplative look on their faces. The strategists who were pointed out by Qin Yining and were dissatisfied with her were now convinced. They sighed and said, sure enough, it's like that. North Placating Marquis didn't take revenge on a specific target, but rather killed indiscriminately. This will give the world the impression that Wang Yi killed the innocent for revenge. In this way, if Wang Yi wants to take revenge in the future, there will be a lot of pressure from public opinion. If he doesn't handle it well, his reputation might be ruined. Doesn't this solve the Dayan people's worries? The strategist stood up and cupped his hands to Qin Yining and said, I'm Dao Han's Han. I hope Miss Qin can forgive me for offending you earlier. Qin Yining stood up and returned the greeting. She smiled and said, Mr. Dao, please don't be so polite. Wang Yi gave us an environment for discussion so that we can express our opinions and exchange opinions. How did Mr. Dao offend you? I was the one who was careless and spoke nonsense in front of everyone. Don't say that. Dao Han's Han said, Miss Qin is intelligent and meticulous. I admire you. Qin Yining exchanged some modest pleasantries with Dao Han's Han before sitting down again. The atmosphere suddenly became very relaxed. The previous hostility and exclusion of Qin Yining from the strategists completely disappeared after the conversation. Everyone now understood why Wang Yi was so deeply in love with her and even risked everything to save her. He didn't hesitate to sacrifice his reputation to rob her in order to protect his family Qin's future. A woman like this was worth cherishing. A family Qin that could raise such a daughter was also a good in-laws. When Pang Xiao saw that the haughty strategists had become respectful and cautious, his mood became so good that it was as if he had eaten a bowl of hot tea in winter. He felt warm and comfortable from the inside out. It seemed like his previous worries were unnecessary. His sister Yi wouldn't shrink back just because others had a bad first impression of her. When she encountered difficulties, she would face them head-on. She wouldn't throw a tantrum, nor would she complain. She was like a body of light. Ever since she was young, she had never backed down from anything she encountered. She had always worked hard and fought to the extreme. Pang Xiao's blood was boiling. His love for Qin Yining had reached an indescribable level. He hated that he couldn't bring her by his side every day so that she would only have him in her heart. While everyone was discussing, Huzi's voice suddenly came from outside. Pang Xiao knew that Huzi must have something important to say. He gestured for everyone to be quiet and said loudly, "Come in." Chapter 312. Qin Yining saw the strange expression on Huzi's face when he replied. He also saw that the aides were hesitant to speak, so he looked at Pang Xiao in confusion. Pang Xiao was calm and said, "I didn't expect that Jilan would ask for Anyang Grand Princess's hand in marriage. I didn't know that they had such a relationship before." Huzi thought to himself, "You and the Grand Princess have a relationship, but do you dare to say it in front of 4th Miss?" Xie Yu and Shu Weiji, who knew the inside story, also looked embarrassed. Qin Yining pondered over Pang Xiao's words and said with a smile, "If there is no relationship between Anyang Grand Princess and North Placating Marquis, could there be a relationship between you and her?" The room was silent. Huzi silently took a few steps back, as if he wanted to escape the storm. The aides also looked at each other, hesitating whether they should leave or not. Pang Xiao said bluntly, "When I overthrew Biji State's tyranny, I followed your majesty all year round. Later, I became sworn brothers with your majesty, so my relationship with the Li family was very close. I often visited them, so the elders often joked about the relationship between me and the Grand Princess." "I see." Qin Yining nodded in understanding and asked, "How old is the Grand Princess? Since she is your Majesty's sister, she shouldn't be young, right?" Pang Xiao said with a smile, "Anyang Grand Princess is the Empress Dowager's daughter. She is 18 years younger than your Majesty and is about the same age as your Majesty's children. Your Majesty only has this one younger sister, and the Grand Princess has been intelligent since she was young, so she has been loved by your Majesty. I once thought that your Majesty had the intention of betrothing Anyang Grand Princess to me in order to get closer to me." At this point, Pang Xiao added seriously, "However, I have no romantic feelings for Princess Royal of Anyang." Qin Yining nodded slightly and asked Huzi, "You just said that North-placating Marquis went to the Emperor and took the initiative to ask for Anyang Grand Princess's hand in marriage?" "Yes. That's what the rumors are saying." Huzi didn't understand why Qin Yining asked this question, so he looked puzzled. Pang Xiao immediately understood her concerns and said, "You suspect that Jilan did not take the initiative to ask for a marriage decree? I do have some doubts. I wonder if there were any signs of this beforehand." Pang Xiao thought about it carefully and shook his head. There were no signs. Jilan did not like Princess Royal and Yang. She had been keeping a distance from her since she was young. However, perhaps Jilan changed her mind and decided to marry Princess Royal. It is understandable. That is indeed a possibility. But now I'm thinking of another possibility. If Anyang eldest princess was often joked about by the elders since she was young, then a young girl's admiration for heroes, plus the ambiguous hints and promises from the elders should have made her have special feelings for you. When Pang Xiao heard this, he anxiously explained, "Anyang and I are not, Wang Yi, I'm not doubting you. I'm just objectively analyzing this matter. Think about it, does Anyang eldest princess have any feelings for you? Other people do not know about this matter, but you should know best." The room was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Pang Xiao did not immediately reply and fell into deep thought. Qin Yining continued, "If you and Anyang eldest princess had an ambiguous relationship before, how could North-placating Marquis not know? If North-placating Marquis knew about the matter between the two of you, his actions of taking the initiative to ask your Majesty to marry Princess Royal would be the opposite of his actions of killing Da Ju's people and expressing goodwill to you." The advisors fell silent again. They had already analyzed and found out that Jiziu's actions were mainly to express goodwill to Pang Xiao. The rest of his actions were derived from this condition. From this, it could be seen that Jiziu still wanted to be on good terms with Pang Xiao. But if Jiziu clearly knew about the relationship between Pang Xiao and Anyang eldest princess and still went to ask your Majesty to grant a marriage, then wouldn't that mean that he did not care about their relationship? Therefore, Qin Yining's analysis was that this matter was very likely your Majesty granting a marriage, and Jiziu had no choice but to comply. If this was the case, then everything could be explained. Your Majesty granted a marriage, so Jiziu had to comply and could not refuse. Then your Majesty would say to the people outside that this time, Jiziu took the initiative to ask for a marriage. Then Pang Xiao, who was once a candidate for the Emperor's son-in-law, would more or less create some animosity between Jiziu. The most important thing was that the person Anyang eldest princess liked was most likely Pang Xiao. If she married Jiziu with love for Pang Xiao, would Jiziu not care? At that time, there would be more disputes. Qin Yining had so many thoughts in her mind, but her expression did not change at all. She also did not intend to say it out loud. After all, when it came to matters of the heart, she also respected Pang Xiao's privacy and did not want to get to the bottom of this matter. The advisors were not stupid. At this time, everyone had already guessed in their hearts. Pang Xiao thought for a while, then smiled domineeringly. He stood up with his hands behind his back and said self-mockingly, "This king's current situation, does it mean that he is besieged on all sides, huh?" He flicked his sleeve and said, "Look, the old officials of Northern Ji hate me to the bone. Dian's surrendered officials are afraid of me. Previously, because of the matter of the soldiers' pay, the brothers who rebelled with me also have some doubts about me. Your Majesty not only took away my military power, but now, if Jilan also turns against me, I will really be weakened and become a lonely person." Pang Xiao's detailed words were all the truth. He did not show any emotion, and it could even be heard that he was in a good mood. However, Pang Xiao's aides felt a sense of crisis, as if a dark cloud was pressing down on the city. Li Chitian stared at the dignified girl kneeling in front of him and helplessly rubbed his eyebrows. He sighed and said, "Helan, how long do you plan to kneel?" Anyang's eldest princess Li Helan looked up at Li Chitian and choked with sobs. She said with grievance, "Imperial brother, you didn't keep your word. When I was young, you said that when Lan grew up, she could marry Pang Zhishi and be his wife. Now, Imperial brother is the most honorable person in the world. You know what Lan wants, but you still betrothed Lan to Jilan. You know that Jilan and I don't like each other. How are we going to live in the future?" Li Helan was born dignified and beautiful. When she cried, she looked even more delicate and pitiful. Li Chitian had doted on his little sister since she was young. Li Helan was also very intelligent and knew when to advance and retreat. Therefore, the relationship between the siblings had always been good. Now that Li Helan cried, Li Chitian also felt distressed. "Get up. Jun has already made a decision, so it cannot be changed. What's wrong with Jilan? He's beautiful and capable in both literature and martial arts. Isn't it perfect for him to be your son-in-law? But Lana doesn't like him. Imperial brother, can you dote on Lana once and not marry Lana to Jilan?" Chapter 313. Although Li Helan wasn't born a princess, her parents and brothers had treated her like a treasure and doted on her. Especially after Li Chitian's conquest of the world, with the financial support of the aristocratic families in Biji and the wealth obtained from the war, Li Helan's life was no less than that of a princess's. Therefore, Li Helan could get whatever she wanted since she was a child. Moreover, in her mind, Pang Xiao should have been hers. Since she was a child, her parents and brothers had said countless times that she would marry Pang Xiao when she grew up. Li Helan had admired Pang Xiao for a long time. She liked his arrogance and admired his wisdom and martial arts. She was now 16 years old, but she had waited 8 years to marry Pang Xiao when she grew up. It could be said that when she first met Pang Xiao when she was 8 years old and heard her mother's praise for him and the promise of betrothing her to Pang Xiao in the future, she had already taken it seriously. Since then, when Li Helan was growing up, marrying Pang Xiao had become her lifelong dream. A reality that had already become a foregone conclusion. Why did it change now? Why did her brother, who had always doted on her, refuse to support her after he gained supreme power in the world? Now, Li Chitian suddenly told her that Pang Xiao had someone else in love. Then, where should she place all her hopes on him after so many years? Li Helan's tears once again rolled down her beautiful face in large droplets, gathering at her chin and staining her lapel. Her peach-pink jacket was also dyed a deep red. Li Chitian looked at his sister who looked as if she had been struck by lightning. He sighed and stood up, slowly walking to Li Helan and helping her up with both hands. "Helan, don't cry. You are my only sister, so I won't harm you. Although Jilan has a cold personality, he is a gentleman. He is not worse than Pang Zhishi. You will have a good life with Jilan. What's more, with Imperial brother around, Jilan wouldn't dare to treat you badly. You can prepare for your marriage with peace of mind, Li Helan sobbed and looked up at Li Chitian with teary eyes. "Royal brother, Lana doesn't want to marry Jilan. Can Lana not marry?" Li Chitian's face darkened impatiently. He frowned and said, "Helan, you have to be obedient. You are not a village girl from the mountains. You should have learned the etiquette of everyone. You also know the 3 obedience and 4 virtues of a woman. Don't tell me you don't want to listen to Imperial brother's words." Although Li Chitian didn't get angry at her, how could someone as smart as Li Helan not understand Li Chitian's meaning? It seemed that this marriage was a foregone conclusion. Regardless of whether it was out of obedience to her elder brother or out of obedience to the emperor, she had to marry Jilan. There was no turning back. No, perhaps, there was still a way out. What if Pang Zhishi was willing to marry her? If Pang Zhishi or Imperial brother spoke up, there might still be a chance. Thinking of this, Li Helan cleverly didn't argue with Li Chitian. She knew her elder brother's personality well. She also knew that her elder brother was no longer the elder brother of the past. He had already become the ruler of a country. His words were like gold and jade and couldn't be disobeyed. If she wanted to live a happy life, the biggest thing she could rely on was her imperial brother's love. If she obeyed, she could still win her imperial brother's pity. If she disobeyed, she was afraid that he would lose his patience. Thinking of this, Li Helan wiped her tears with her sleeve and smiled at Li Chitian. She said hoarsely, "Lan will listen to imperial brother." She clearly felt wronged, but she smiled at him with tears in her eyes and softly said that she would listen to him. This touched the soft spot in Li Chitian's heart. She was so obedient and smiled to reassure him with tears in her eyes. This made Li Chitian feel even more pity for her. Li Chitian patted Li Helan's shoulder to comfort her and rewarded her with a lot of gold, silver, and jewelry. Only then did he let her return to the Palace of Peace and Tranquility to rest. Li Helan lived with the Empress Dowager in the Palace of Peace and Tranquility. After leaving the imperial study, she walked expressionlessly with her personal maid, He Xiang, all the way back to the side hall of the Palace of Peace and Tranquility. Li Helan angrily grabbed the golden hairpin on her head and threw it on the ground, stomping on it a few times. He Xiang hurriedly sent the palace servants away and carefully closed the door. At this time, Li Helan had already angrily rushed into the inner room. She grabbed a pillow and smashed it with force. Her expression was ferocious and she screamed silently. Her face was distorted like a crazy woman. She was so tired that she was gasping for breath. Then she slowly stopped and her tears surged again. He Xiang went forward with heartache and softly advised, "Princess Royal, you must take care of yourself. Don't wrong yourself." Li Helan sobbed. She covered her face and cried for a long time. Then she said, "No, this matter can't be let go. I have to find Pang Zhishi. I can't make imperial brother change his words. Pang Zhishi must have it. But what if Prince Zhongshiren doesn't agree? Doesn't agree? Will he?" Li Helan was stunned for a moment with tears in her eyes. Her eyes gradually became sharp. "Go and find out the origin of the woman that Prince Zhongshiren kidnapped in the hotel that day. I want to know all the rumors about them, no matter how big or small." "Yes. This servant will give the order." He Xiang immediately became serious. She bowed and left to make arrangements. An ordinary-looking palace servant who had been observing outside the Palace of Peace and Tranquility for a long time quietly went to the imperial study. Qin Yining had been very relaxed these 2 days. Although the Yarrow clan's words were a bit harsh when they first met, Qin Yining found that the Yarrow clan didn't have any hostility towards her. On the contrary, they might even like her very much. The Yarrow clan was an intelligent and gentle woman. Often, the gentleness in her words could make people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. When getting along with the Yarrow clan, it was as if there was no psychological pressure. They were like warm spring water that made people feel comfortable both physically and mentally. Madame Ma had a straightforward personality. Usually, when she had nothing to do, she would order her servant to invite Qin Yining. The Yarrow clan would often accompany Qin Yining to accompany Madame Ma to talk. When Madame Ma was young, she wandered the Jianghu and was experienced and knowledgeable. She would often tell Qin Yining some of her experiences. Qin Yining could often put forward unique opinions and asked questions that were on point. This made Madame Ma like her even more. She often chatted with her until dinner. Even after dinner, she didn't want to let her go. "Mother, you forgot again. Sister Yi still has to go back to the Shui garden. Otherwise, what if people gossip?" The Yarrow clan took the cloak from the servant and put it on Qin Yining. Qin Yining hurriedly thanked them. She cooperatively raised her chin and let the Yarrow clan help her tie the ribbon on her collar. Madame Ma sighed and said, "It's really helpless. Now our house is too big. It's better to squeeze together as a family from before. It's also convenient to talk in daily life. We can also be intimate with each other. There aren't so many rules." The Yarrow clan laughed when they heard this. In the past, our Dai Fu didn't have such a high official position. "Sister Yi is already in the capital. Mother, are you still afraid that Sister Yi won't be there in the future?" These words made Madame Ma laugh heartily. Qin Yining's cheeks burned red. She hurriedly bowed and left. Seeing Qin Yining run away in embarrassment, Madame Ma and the Yarrow clan looked at each other and couldn't help but find it funny. The more we interact with this child, the more we like her. That's right. If she can really enter our family, it will be the Daifu's good fortune. While the mother and daughter were talking, Qin Yining had already called Lian Xiaoju, who was playing in the courtyard just now. The two of them carried lanterns and headed towards the Shui garden. Chapter 3:14. One of the two women was wearing a red cloak with a white fur collar. She was tall and beautiful. The other was wearing a silver fox fur vest paired with a light green cotton skirt. She was holding a delicate stove the size of an apple, which made her look very cute. Both of them were around 17 or 18 years old. They were accompanied by maidservants and grannies. Qin Yining stopped and looked at the group of people. She didn't need to think to know that there were no other young beauties in Prince Zhongshuan's residence other than the beautiful concubines that Your Majesty had bestowed upon Pang Xiao. Qin Yining didn't want to have anything to do with these people. Even if they might live under the same roof in the future, that was a matter for the future. There was no need to rush to get to know them. Therefore, she only nodded slightly to the two women and walked around them with Lian Xiaoju. The tall and beautiful young girl stared at Qin Yining with her watery eyes. She narrowed her eyes and didn't hide her hostility. Qin Yining could tell that the two women were deliberately blocking her way to cause trouble. The moment the two passed by, the beautiful young girl spat at Qin Yining. "Pay, slut. You're shameless to seduce Wang Yi." Qin Yining looked at the spit on her skirt and looked at the beautiful young girl in astonishment. The cute young girl in green didn't expect this to happen and hurriedly said, "Ru Niang, don't cause trouble." "What do you know?" Ru Niang sneered and said, "If you don't dare, then go back. No one told you to follow me." The maidservant at the side supported the young girl in green and said, "Miss Xinche, let's go back." Ru Niang glanced at Xinche, her eyes full of ridicule. Qin Yining grabbed Lian Xiaozhou's hand to prevent her from being impulsive and sneered, "Miss Ru Niang, right? That's me. What about it? Lick it clean." Qin Yining pointed at the spit on her skirt. Ru Niang looked at Qin Yining in astonishment for a moment and suddenly laughed mockingly. "If I spit on your face, would you ask me to lick it clean? If I did that, do you think you'd still be alive?" "Bullshit." Ru Niang roared angrily. "Who do you think you are? You're just a bitch picked up by Wang Yi. In the future, Wang Yi will definitely kill your whole family, including you. You can only use your face to beg Wang Yi. You dare to be so arrogant in front of us sisters. You're embarrassing Wang Yi and tarnishing Your Majesty's grace." Xinche's persuasion sounded gentle, but in fact, every word and sentence was telling Qin Yining that they were concubines bestowed by the emperor to Pang Xiao. Their status was noble, and they were naturally different from a lowly woman like her, who was forcibly taken into the family. This was reminding her to behave herself. It seemed that Miss Xinche was more than one level smarter than Ru Niang. Qin Yining couldn't help but feel a little funny. She hadn't even entered the concubine's house yet, but the concubines were already furious. They actually blocked her way to give her a show of strength. It was all thanks to Pang Xiao's acting outside that this scene happened. As soon as she thought of this, Qin Yining suddenly had a flash of light in her mind. Then she grabbed Ru Niang's collar vigorously, pushed her violently to the ground, and put the spit on her skirt to Ru Niang's mouth. "Lick it clean for me." Ru Niang and the other 10 concubines were beauties that Li Chitian specially found from the common people to train for several years. They hoped that they could play a big role in the future. Therefore, these 10 concubines lived like princes in addition to learning how to serve men. Almost no one dared to treat them like this. Now they were treated so rudely by Qin Yining. How could they be as calm as before? Ru Niang shouted in shock and anger, "Let me go, vicious whore. Bitch. When Wang Yi comes back, he will definitely punish you severely." "You bitch. Punish? Then let him punish me however he wants. I'm already like this now. What's there to be afraid of? I'm born in a big family. Now even people like you dare to bully me. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Qin Yining grabbed Ru Niang's hair and pressed her to the ground while scolding her. He didn't care whether her struggling hands would catch him or not. Seeing that they were about to fight, Xinche hurriedly ordered the maids and older female concubines to take sides. Lian Xiaoju didn't care about the rules that Qin Yining taught her at this time. Like a kitten that had been provoked, she suddenly rushed forward and threw the maids and older female concubines to the ground one by one. These women fell to the ground and cried out ouch and mother. Even Miss Xinche was pushed back 2 steps and fell to the ground by Lian Xiaoju. The apple-sized hand warmer also fell to the ground and the charcoal scattered all over the ground. Ru Niang's face was pressed to the ground and her back was stepped on by Qin Yining. She screamed and cried loudly. The maids and older female concubines who got up and came over were slapped by Qin Yining. They were dizzy and fell to the ground. Qin Yining and Lian Xiaoju overturned 7 or 8 maids and older female concubines brought by Xinche and Ru Niang. The place was in chaos and screaming. Madame Ma and Yarrow clan, who were in the Pine Crane Hall not far away, hurriedly put on their cotton-padded clothes and rushed out to check. Madame Ma and Yarrow clan were stunned when they saw Qin Yining stepping on a battered and exhausted beauty and lifting a servant girl by the collar and throwing her to the side like a female general with infinite strength. Heavens, was this still the intelligent and gentle young lady from a respectable family they knew? The chaos here also alarmed the people in front of the Chuehua gate. Pang Xiao and Yarrow Chungu quickly walked in and saw that Qin Yining and Lian Xiaoju, one tall and one short, were the only ones standing in this open space. The rest of the people were either sitting or lying on the ground. They couldn't react for a while. What's going on? Yarrow Chungu couldn't help but ask. When Ru Niang heard the sound, she hurriedly cried and said, Wang Yi, save me. This crazy hoof wants to kill people. Qin Yining stomped his foot hard and said, if you dare to scold me again, I'll kill you. Ah! Ru Niang's voice was hoarse from being stepped on. She was exhaling more than she was inhaling, and her eyes rolled back. Mrs. Ma's eyes were sparkling as she watched, and her heart was already overjoyed. She had long disliked the 10 pretentious people, but she didn't expect Yi to be so domineering and beat them down so easily. She was indeed the person that her precious grandson had taken a liking to. Yarrow clan, on the other hand, looked at Qin Yining's female bandit appearance thoughtfully. Yarrow Chungu and Pang Xiao looked at each other after recovering from the shock. They showed the same expression as Yarrow clan and understood a little. Pang Xiao suppressed his laughter and coughed before reprimanding with a stern face, what are you doing? This is this king's mansion, how can you behave so atrociously? Let go of me. Qin Yining trembled and looked at Pang Xiao in disbelief. His voice trembled but he stubbornly said, she was the one who started it first. She spat on me and even insulted me. Chapter 3:15. Qin Yining seemed to be shocked by Pang Xiao's anger. His watery eyes sparkled and reflected the light of the lanterns in the night, making him look pitiful. Ronyang noticed that Qin Yining had loosened his grip on her foot and immediately got up. She didn't dare to fight back against Qin Yining in public, but she didn't hide the ridicule in her eyes when she looked at Qin Yining. Sister Ronyang, are you okay? Xinche limped over to support Ronyang and turned back to look at Pang Xiao gratefully. His eyes seemed to say that if he hadn't come, they would have been killed by the female devil today. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining had a natural tacit understanding. Although they knew what each other was thinking at this time, when he saw Qin Yining like this, he still felt a burst of heartache. He endured it and continued to reprimand, why are you staring at me? Do you dare to disagree with this king's words? The tears in Qin Yining's eyes were like the snow on the branches and fell down with this roar. Lian Xiaoju was so angry that she roared and rushed to Pang Xiao, punching and kicking him. She was small in stature, compared to Pang Xiao, her arms and legs were even shorter. In addition, although her heart was filled with thoughts, her speech was not fluent. She wanted to curse, but she was unable to do so. She was so anxious that she cried out intermittently, you bullied Jejia. Bad guy. Bad guy. Qin Yining felt distressed when he saw Lian Xiaoju so protective of him. He hurriedly pulled Lian Xiaoju away from Pang Xiao's legs, held her in his arms, and hugged her apologetically to comfort her. Pang Xiao was punched a few times by the little girl and saw Qin Yining hugging the child and crying. Although he knew that all this was done for the eyes of others, his heart still throbbed with pain. Crying. You dare to behave atrociously in this king's mansion and still have the face to cry. Do you think this king will spare you because of your tears? Qin Yining squatted on the ground and hugged Lian Xiaozhu. He buried his face in Lian Xiaozhou's shoulder, and his shoulders trembled slightly. Lian Xiaozhu wanted to scold Pang Xiao, but she couldn't. She wanted to hit her, but she knew that she couldn't win. Seeing Qin Yining like this, she also burst into tears. Madame Ma, who had been stunned for a long time, finally regained her senses. Seeing that Pang Xiao had bullied Qin Yining so pitifully, although she was puzzled as to why he suddenly changed his attitude, her love for Qin Yining was real. She immediately wanted to rush forward to stand up for Qin Yining. Yarrow Clan and Yarrow Chungu, who had unknowingly walked to Madame Ma's side, pulled her back in time. Yarrow Chungu pinched her arm suggestively. There was naturally a tacit understanding between an old married couple. Madame Ma turned back and saw Yarrow Chungu's gaze. She hesitated and didn't move. Pang Xiao had already said in a deep voice, "Come, take her back to Trace Snow Garden and lock her up. Without this king's orders, no one is allowed to let her out, and no one is allowed to visit her." Yes. A female servant immediately responded and came forward to help Qin Yining up. She also pulled Lian Xiaozhu up. She was held on both sides as if she was afraid that she would run away, so she was escorted away. Pang Xiao frowned and stood with his hands behind his back. He coldly watched as Qin Yining was taken away. It wasn't until his figure disappeared around the corner that he turned back to look coldly at Ronyang. "Why are you here?" At this time, Ronyang's hair was messy and she was crying like a pear blossom in the rain. She looked really pitiful. When she heard Pang Xiao's question, she timidly looked up. Unexpectedly, she met Pang Xiao's sharp narrowed eyes. She immediately felt as if someone had stabbed her heart with an ice arrow. She was so scared that she lowered her head and trembled. Replying to Wang Yi, "I just came out for a walk. It's already dark. You came out to enjoy the night scenery?" Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows. His voice was slow and gentle. However, the oppression in his voice made the servants on the side keep quiet out of fear. Facing Pang Xiao, Ronyang was already trembling like a sieve. She couldn't spit out half a word. Seeing this, Xinche could only bite the bullet and say, replying to Wang Yi, "It's true. Sister Ronyang said that she wanted to take a walk after dinner, so we came out for a walk. Unexpectedly, we met Miss Qin." "Did she ask you?" Xinche was stunned. "What? Did this king ask you?" Pang Xiao squinted at Xinche. His expression seemed to have seen through all the thoughts in Xinche's mind. Xinche was scared and ashamed. She lowered her head in panic. Pang Xiao said coldly, "Since you are the people bestowed by your majesty, you should think more before you do things. Don't lose your dignity. Don't think that because your majesty bestowed you to this king, you are superior to others in the mansion. If this king finds that you don't abide by your duties and commit outrages, this king can send your corpses back to your majesty. If you don't believe me, you can try." "Yes, I don't dare. I don't dare." Ronyang's voice trembled so much that it didn't sound like a human's voice. Pang Xiao waved his hand. Ronyang and Xinche immediately ran away with their personal maids as if they had been pardoned. When peace was restored, Pang Xiao turned around and walked towards the Pine Crane Hall. Mrs. Ma wanted to ask, but was pulled back by Yarrow Chungu. Everyone entered the room in silence. After instructing someone to guard outside and making sure that no one was approaching, Pang Xiao said, "You scared Grandpa, Grandma, and Mother just now, right?" "That's my fault." Mrs. Ma anxiously lowered her voice and said, "What were you doing just now? You actually had red eyebrows and green eyes in front of Yi Yi. How awe-inspiring can you be when you're using force on a woman? You've really lived for more than 20 years in a dog's stomach. Have you forgotten the principles that your grandmother taught you?" Seeing Yi Yi crying like that, even if you don't feel sorry for her, I do. "Mother, don't get agitated. Dai Fu did it on purpose." Yarrow Chungu held Mrs. Ma's hand, feeling a little helpless against his impulsive mother. Mrs. Ma said, even if you did it on purpose, you still made Sister Yi cry. Yes, Grandma. Pang Xiao recalled his Qin Yining appearance just now and felt a wave of sadness in his heart. I pretended to snatch Sister Yi into the family outside in order to protect the family Qin's future. Now that Sister Yi has entered the family, if my attitude towards her is different from what I did that day, I'm afraid there will be a lot of speculations if outsiders hear about it. The 10 women bestowed by Your Majesty are usually quite dutiful. Sister Yi hasn't come out to greet us for so many days, but she suddenly came out today. There must be something fishy about it, so I deliberately put on a show with Sister Yi in order to deceive the eyes of the people in our family. Mrs. Ma was not stupid. She understood everything as soon as Pang Xiao said it. She frowned and thought for a moment, then finally punched the Kang a few times. I'm so aggrieved. I can't live freely in my own family. Wasn't it aggrieved? How could Pang Xiao not feel aggrieved? But now that the situation was forced, even if he was aggrieved, he had to continue living his life. Dai Fu, secretly go and see Miss Qin later and comfort her a little. Don't make her feel uncomfortable. That girl is unlucky to be involved with you. Yarrow Changgu took out his tobacco pipe and stuffed it into the pot with his rough hands. Pang Xiao's eyebrows twitched when he heard this, and he said indignantly, Grandfather, what are you saying? Am I not good enough to her? Don't be indignant. Back then, what did I want when I followed your grandfather? Wasn't it because your grandfather was a dutiful person? How could he give me a peaceful life if he knew his place? You, on the other hand, don't rest all day. You're either fighting outside and not at home, or you're hanging your head on your belt when you're home. Who is your wife? She has to worry about you to death, and if she's not careful, she'll be implicated by you. You say that you're good enough to her, but doesn't she have to help you plan and put on a show? Even if I don't blame you, it's tiring enough for Lassie to be with you. Mrs. Ma's scolding struck a chord in Pang Xiao's heart. Even if others didn't say it out loud, he also felt the same way. His situation was indeed difficult, and Qin Yining had no choice but to go through the difficulties with him. He could only promise her his unwavering sincerity, but he couldn't promise her absolute stability. What did a woman want? Even a heroine like her grandmother, who ventured into the pugilistic world when she was young, would rather marry a chef in the end for a stable life. Qin Yining had been lonely since she was a child. She wouldn't like to live a challenging life, would she? Pang Xiao faced his shortcomings for the first time after being scolded. Although he had thousands of good points, this one shortcoming was enough to give Qin Yining a reason not to be with him. Seeing Pang Xiao's dark face and his expression as if he was about to bite someone, Mrs. Ma was also angered. She glared at him and was about to take off her shoes. What? You're still not convinced? Believe it or not, I'll beat you to death with the sole of my shoe. Hey, Mother. When the Yarrow clan saw Mrs. Ma taking off her shoes, they hurriedly reached out to pull her back. Mrs. Ma didn't have her feet bound. She had a pair of big feet. The soles of her shoes were hand-sewn by the women. They were hard and thick, and could leave a red mark on a person's body. After all, the Yarrow clan loved their son dearly. How could they bear to let him be beaten? Yarrow Changgu had already lit a cigarette. He smacked his lips with a smile and looked like he was watching the show from the sidelines. Pang Xiao obediently let Mrs. Ma hit him twice with the sole of her shoe. Then, he said helplessly, Grandmother, calm down. I'll sit here for a while. Later, I'll avoid people and go to see Sister Yi. Is that okay? Yes. That's more like it. Mrs. Ma's temper came and went quickly. Seeing that Pang Xiao was so big and was Wang Yi, and he was still as obedient as when he was a child, she felt very comforted. Thinking about it carefully, she couldn't blame him for what happened outside. She secretly cursed the treacherous emperor in her heart. When Li Chitian heard the spy report the details of what happened in Pang Xiao's residence, he asked, in your opinion, Prince Zhongshiren really doesn't care about the family Qin girl? The spy was dressed in black. She had a delicate figure and her face was wrapped in a black cloth. Her voice was female. Replying to your majesty, in my opinion, Prince Zhongshiren also likes the family Qin girl. That woman was born with a heavenly beauty that could cause the downfall of cities and countries. It's understandable that heroes find it hard to resist the charms of beauties. However, in Prince Zhongshan's heart, the hatred for his father should be heavier. Otherwise, he wouldn't love and hate the daughter of the Qin family. Yes. Li Qitian paced back and forth with his hands behind his back. After carefully analyzing for a moment, he finally relaxed and smiled. I know that a person like him can't let go of the hatred for his father. You did a good job. Thank you for your Majesty's praise. It's my duty. There's one more thing. In the past 2 days, Princess Royal of Enyang has visited Prince Zhongshan in the mansion for 2 consecutive days. Prince Zhongshan was not in the mansion the first time. The second time, he deliberately avoided her. Today, Princess Royal of Enyang returned with disappointment and anger. Li Qitian nodded mysteriously and said, I see. You continue to do your own thing. Chapter 316. Li Qitian stared blankly at a coral bonsai in the corner of the inner hall for a moment. His eyes were filled with a struggle of emotions. After staring blankly for a full hour, his expression finally changed from hesitation to determination. Li Guanwen. This servant is here. Li Guanwen, who had been standing in the shadows in the corner, immediately stepped forward and saluted. Li Qitian's voice echoed in the spacious hall, Go to the palace of Compassionate and Peaceful. Give He Lan some fashionable clothes. Tell He Xiong to serve her master well and not be distracted. If Zhen finds out, Zhen won't forgive her. Yes. This servant will go immediately. Your Majesty, are you going to flip the tiles tonight? Li Guanwen thought for a moment, then said, Zhen will go see the Empress. Qin Yining's life had become more and more peaceful in recent days. Ever since she coincidentally met the 2 concubines that day and was angrily reprimanded by Pang Xiao, she was grounded. The scenery in Tu Shui Garden was pleasant, and the people who served her were all trusted aides arranged by Pang Xiao. She only brought Lian Xiaoju with her and lived with her. When she was free, she would teach Lian Xiaoju some things. For example, she would try her best to ask Lian Xiaoju some questions so that she could practice answering. Another example would be teaching Lian Xiaoju some common sense and rules of the world, or teaching her the art of tea and cooking. In short, whenever Qin Yining encountered something that Lian Xiaoju didn't know, she would patiently explain it to her. Today, after lunch, Qin Yining was bored when he heard a few dog barks. One of the barks was deep and the other was soft. Hearing the soft barks, he knew it was Big White. The other one was unfamiliar, but he didn't know where it came from. Lian Xiaoju heard the barks and jumped up in joy. Sister, a dog. She ran out as she spoke. There was a dog hole in the wall of Tu Shui Garden's backyard. The Yarrow clan's Pekingese, Big White, often came into play. Qin Yining chased after her and helped her put on a cotton cloak. Slow down, don't fall. Her head maidservant, Xian Yun, smiled and said, Miss really treats Miss Lian like her own younger sister. Xian Yun had a delicate figure and a beautiful face. Like Ji Yun, she was Pang Xiao's trusted aide and was trustworthy. Ji Yun's martial arts skills were outstanding. That day, Pang Xiao gave Ji Yun to Qin Yining, intending to protect her closely. Xian Yun didn't know martial arts, but she was cautious and intelligent. She was also very knowledgeable in tea ceremony, cooking, and needlework. She was also very good at managing the maids in the courtyard. She almost didn't need Qin Yining to say anything and she could handle everything properly. She was very clever and sensible. Now that they were living in the prince's mansion, Pang Xiao gave Xianyun to Qin Yining. Qin Yining smiled and said, Little Kanji saved my life. If I hadn't met her in the mountains that day, I would have frozen or starved to death. This child's father had just died, and she had no one to rely on in the mountains. She's clearly 10 years old, but she still looks like a child. I thought that as long as I could come out alive, I would definitely bring her along to repay her kindness. Now that I have the opportunity, I naturally have to do my best to take care of her. She was afraid that Pang Xiao would find out, so she kept telling Lian Xiaoju to say that she was 1 year older. Miss Lian is a very emotional person. No wonder Wang Yi only has Miss Lian in his heart. Xian Yun fetched a white fox fur cloak and put it on Qin Yining. She also took out a hand basket wrapped in white rabbit fur and cotton wool and handed it to Qin Yining. Miss Lian grew up in the south, so you definitely won't be able to adapt to the northern winter immediately. You should wear more clothes before going out. If you catch a cold, Wang Yi will definitely be distressed. Thank you very much. Qin Yining smiled and put her hands into the handbasket. Sure enough, it was soft and warm inside. It seemed that she had been drying it on the kang just now, waiting for Qin Yining to use it when her hands were cold. Qin Yining walked to the door, and Xian Yun lifted the warm curtain for her. The cold wind blew against her face. The snow in the courtyard was extremely clean, and only the top of the wall and the branches occasionally had snow rustling down. Lian Xiaoju, who was wearing a red coat, was holding a snow-white Pekingese in her arms. She was squatting on the ground and staring blankly at a big black dog that was baring its teeth not far away. Qin Yining was also stunned for a moment. She asked Xian Yun, "That is? That's Big Black. I heard that it's already 10 years old. It used to be raised by the old master's family. It's very good at guarding the house and is very smart. It can understand human language." Qin Yining laughed. So, Big Black and Little Kanji are the same age. Xian Yun looked at the big black dog with well-proportioned muscles and then looked at the little girl in the red coat who was squatting on the ground. She couldn't help but laugh. Qin Yining walked down the stairs. Thinking that this big black dog was luckier than her and had actually seen the young Pang Zhishi, she couldn't help but smile and bend down to tease it. Big Black. Big Black immediately looked over. Its ears twitched, and its tail wavered hesitantly. It also stopped baring its teeth. Lian Xiaoju heard Qin Yining's voice and ran over with the little Pekingese in her arms. Her eyes were shining. Big dog. Yes, it's a big dog. Little Kanji, do you like it? Lian Xiaoju nodded repeatedly. Yes, I like it. Roast it. Qin Yining almost fell over. No wonder the smart and intelligent Big Black would bare its teeth at Lian Xiaoju. This little girl actually wanted to roast it. Lian Xiaoju had lived in the mountains for so many years, and the food she ate was mainly roasted. Therefore, she had a great interest in roasted meat. Yesterday, she had even caught sparrows to roast in Su Shui Garden. Even though she was full now, she still couldn't help but want to roast it. Qin Yining tapped her forehead and said, "No, don't we have food now? There are all kinds of delicious food. Isn't that enough for you? Big Black has an owner. You can't roast it. Do you understand?" Lian Xiaoju frowned and nodded sadly. She understood everything and was extremely smart. However, she still didn't make any progress in speaking and was still very clumsy. However, her biggest strength was that she was obedient and only listened to Qin Yining. When Qin Yining said that she couldn't eat roasted Big Black, she stopped thinking about it. Perhaps because the little girl no longer coveted Big Black couldn't sense her malice. It raised its head and stood in place, barked twice, and wagged its tail. Qin Yining stroked Big Black's head and scratched its chin to make Big Black itchy. Big Black barked a few times and made happy sounds in its throat. It wagged its tail and simply lay on the ground with its paws, exposing its belly. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect the legendary Big Black to be so close to people. Big White, who was in Lian Xiaozhou's arms, twisted its small body and jumped down to the ground. It also circled around Qin Yining's feet. Qin Yining handed the cage to Xian Yun and took the time to stroke it. The small animal's body was soft and warm. Its furry skin was very comfortable to the touch. Qin Yining couldn't help but stroke it a few more times. He felt that the knot in his heart had been lifted. "You're gentler to them than you are to me. I'm really jealous." Suddenly, Pang Xiao's magnetic and smiling voice came from above him. Qin Yining looked up and saw Pang Xiao standing in front of him with her hands behind her back. Big Black and Big White both turned over and got up. One black and one white, one big and one small, crazily wagged their tails and swayed their butts. They circled around Pang Xiao's feet, obviously trying to get close to her. Qin Yining stood up. Xian Yun immediately handed her a hot handkerchief to wipe her hands and put the cage on Qin Yining. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Why didn't you go out today?" "I went out for a while and just came back." I have 2 news for you. Chapter 317. What's the news? Qin Yining walked to Pang Xiao in confusion. Pang Xiao stretched out his long arm and put it around her shoulder. As they walked into the room, he said, Zhuo Jinwei angered your majesty yesterday. Your majesty ordered him to be beaten 30 times. Then, he was stripped of all his official positions. Now, his idol at home. Qin Yining laughed and didn't comment. She had already expected that Zhuo Jinwei's outcome would not be good. After all, Emperor Zhu was a suspicious person. Zhuo Jinwei's report was contradictory, and it caused Emperor Zhu to set up such a large formation in front of the city gates. The conflict that was originally hidden in the dark was suddenly brought to light. Zhu Di was a shrewd man, but this time, he was exposed and lost face. How could he tolerate Zhuo Jinwei's presence? Even if Zhuo Jinwei was extremely talented, Emperor Zhu's suspicion of him would cause him to lose his future. Pang Xiao saw that she wasn't surprised at all. He praised and liked her in his heart. He scratched her nose with his index finger and said dotingly, Your reaction is so calm that I don't feel any sense of accomplishment. When we just came from the study, Mr. Shu, Mr. Xie, and the others praised you as a half-immortal who could foresee things. I was proud of it, but I didn't want to show off in front of them. I could only endure it. Who knew that when it came to you, you didn't give me a chance to be proud at all? It's really strange. This is something that was bound to happen. What's there to be happy about? Pang Xiao waved his hand and dismissed Xian Yun and the others. He pressed her shoulder and let her sit on the warm kang by the window. He bent over to look at her bright little face and kissed her forehead. In short, I'm very happy. It's not only because of the position of the commander of the Tiger Army, but also because my sister Yi is so powerful. You don't know how much they admire you now. I knew that my sister Yi had the ability to subdue those people. You're so good. Even if they have prejudice against you, they will like you after interacting with you. Qin Yining's face heated up. She gently pushed his shoulder. All right, if you're so proud, they will laugh at you. Joke. They can't wait to be jealous. Pang Xiao sat down next to her. That's one thing. Didn't you say there was one more thing? Yes. Pang Xiao said, Your Majesty's men have brought back the scattered Dayan troops. They should be able to enter the capital tomorrow. My parents have been found. Qin Yining stood up in surprise. Pang Xiao put his arm around her shoulder and asked her to sit down. He comforted her and said, This is what I want to talk to you about. Your family members are all there, but I didn't see your father, mother, and concubine mother in that group. Qin Yining felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She stood there in a daze for a moment. The worry that she had been suppressing for the past few days was now like a flood breaking through a dam, causing her to feel dizzy and disoriented. How can that be? Why didn't my father and mother come back together? That day, our family was at the back of the group. Concubine Cao also knows martial arts, and my father had bodyguards and attendants with him. How could they not find them? Don't panic, Sister Yi. Don't panic. Pang Xiao held her shoulder with his big hand and patted her cheek, saying, You also said that the Marquis of Anping has bodyguards protecting him, and concubine Cao is also there. He must be safe, but we don't know what is holding him back. Don't worry, I have already arranged for people to go out and search. If we investigate all the way back from the scene of the incident, we will definitely find him. Qin Yining closed her eyes. For a moment, she still hadn't recovered from the news that her entire family had been found, but her parents hadn't come back. Pang Xiao hugged her slender waist. She leaned into his embrace in a daze and even rubbed against his shoulder like a coquettish kitten. His tender heart melted. Good girl, don't worry. Your body hasn't fully recovered. You haven't recovered from the loss of blood and qi. You also went through a famine, fled for your life, and schemed. Even a person made of iron wouldn't be able to withstand it. You don't have to worry now. Just take good care of your body and leave the rest to me, all right? Yes. Qin Yining nodded obediently. She closed her eyes and leaned on him with peace of mind. Pang Xiao continued, Also, I've sent someone to investigate in secret. It said that the old lord, second elder, and third elder came to us on their own when the county king of Yang's entourage was approaching the capital. They had been separated from each other earlier. It seems that all the money they had brought with them had been stolen. On such a cold day, all of them were dressed in rags. It must have been difficult for them to gather together after being separated from each other. My spies said that they didn't look right. You should have a plan in your heart and prepare yourself mentally. All right. I understand. Qin Yining closed her eyes tiredly and leaned on Pang Xiao. She didn't want to move at all. She just wanted to empty her mind and not think about the whereabouts of her father and mother. She also didn't want to think about what had happened to the old madam and the others. She also didn't want to think about how to settle the family Qin after they arrived in the capital. She just wanted to have a good sleep and throw away all these troublesome matters. She didn't want to think about anything else. Pang Xiao's large hand gently patted her back. He found that her body was getting heavier and heavier. She slowly leaned into his embrace completely. He sighed softly and kissed her temples. He carefully carried her up and placed her on the Kang bed. He carefully covered her with a blanket. She must be very worried, right? She was so worried that she was using sleep to escape reality. Pang Xiao caressed her face with heartache. He then sat to the side, admiring her sleeping face while thinking about the current affairs of the imperial court. Right at this time, a soft call came from outside the door. Wang Yi. Pang Xiao immediately got up and tiptoed outside. He carefully closed the door before asking softly, "What is it?" Xian Yun bowed and said softly, "The people outside said that Marquis Dingbei's Fu sent an invitation and asked you to go take a look." When Pang Xiao heard the words Marquis Dingbei, he was stunned for a moment. He then ordered Xian Yun to serve Qin Yining well and strode outside. Ji Zheyu sent an invitation to Pang Xiao, inviting him to go out for a walk and drink wine tomorrow. After Ji Zheyu returned to the capital to apologize, he proposed to Enyang Princess Royal. Your Majesty agreed and ordered Ji Zheyu to stay in the capital to complete the marriage while Tayton was in chaos and the borders were stable. Ji Zheyu finally had the chance to stay and drink wine with Pang Xiao, who was idle at home. Pang Xiao ordered someone to tell Ji Zheyu that he would definitely be there on time tomorrow. He thought for a moment and then went to the study in the outer courtyard to gather his advisors for a discussion. The next morning, Pang Xiao left with Huzi and several guards. After Qin Yining slept, she had calmed down. She had thought things through. Now that things had come to this, she could only deal with whatever came her way. Worrying about things that hadn't happened yet was groundless. Worrying about things that had already happened was useless. She might as well focus on the present. Qin Yining called Lian Xiaoju in and said with a smile, "While we are free, I will teach you a few more words." At the same time, a luxurious carriage slowly stopped in front of Prince Zhengxian's Fu. A few pale-faced servants dressed as attendants lifted the curtain. The head palace maid Haxiang carefully helped Enyang Princess Royal off the carriage. Chapter 318. The servant nodded and trotted forward to knock on the door. Not long after, a doorman answered and opened the door. When he saw who it was, he hurriedly came forward and bowed politely. "This humble one pays his respects to Princess Royal." Li Helan slightly raised her chin and raised her long and narrow eyes slightly. She looked at the gilded plaque of Prince Zhengxian's mansion on the lintel and asked softly without looking sideways, "Pass a message to Wang Yi that I'm here." The doorman bowed and said, "Princess Royal, our Wang Yi is not in the mansion." "Not in?" Li Helan's voice was neither fast nor slow. No one could tell whether she was happy or angry, but her majestic aura could not be ignored. The doorman lowered his head and knelt on the ground, saying, "Wang Yi said that he went to keep an appointment and left early in the morning." "Appointment? Whose appointment?" Li Helan glanced at the doorman. The doorman said, "How would this humble one know about such things?" Li Helan slightly raised the corners of her mouth and said, "Then I'll gradually meet old madam and old madam." As she spoke, she walked inside. The doorman did not dare to stop her. He only complained inwardly and hurriedly chased after her. At this time, Xu Weiji had already received the news. After thinking for a while, She simply came out to greet Li Helan and bowed, "Greetings to Princess Royal." Li Helan saw that the person who stopped her was an elder with a scholarly appearance. She guessed that this person was most likely the steward of the mansion. A smile appeared on her beautiful face and her voice was gentle as she said, "No need for formalities. I heard that your Wang Yi is not in the mansion. I've been here twice and haven't been able to see him. Today, I can only disturb the elders in the mansion." Xu Weiji discreetly sized up Li Helan's expression, then quickly lowered her eyes and said, "Yes, it's really unfortunate today. Wang Yi has an appointment with a friend outside. Old Master, Old Madam, and Old Madam are also very bored these days and went out early in the morning. The masters in the mansion are not at home. Ever since the news of Enyang Princess Royal's marriage with Ji Ziyu spread, she had visited twice. Considering the past and Anyang's feelings for Pang Xiao, it was easy to guess why she came. Wang Yi avoided her and had no reason to let her see the elders. Princess Royal had a noble status. When Old Master, Old Madam, and Old Madam saw her, did they have to kneel down and kowtow to listen to her lecture? Xu Weiji didn't dare to make the old man feel awkward, so he might as well not see him. Hearing this, Li Helan's face flushed red with anger. Not at home? They are not at home? Are they really not at home or are they hiding from me? Xu Weiji politely bowed with a smile on her face. "Princess Royal, please forgive me. I didn't know you were coming today. It just so happens that the masters are not at home." She hinted that the Princess Royal didn't even send an invitation when she came and just came to block her. Li Helan was ashamed and angry. She was so angry that she almost turned around and left. She wanted to send an invitation, but she knew Pang Xiao's personality. She would avoid her even more if she saw an invitation. She could only meet her if she made a surprise attack. Could it be that Pang Xiao cared about her face? Thinking that she was already engaged to Ji Ziyu, she didn't care about the past between them. Thinking about Pang Xiao's personality, Li Helan felt that this was very likely. But the more Pang Xiao avoided her, the more she wanted to see her. It didn't make sense that she, the Princess Royal, would be blocked outside the door several times. Moreover, according to her analysis, the Old Master and Old Madam might still be at home. They just didn't want to see her. Li Helan took a deep breath and suppressed her anger. Her voice was neither high nor low, neither fast nor slow. She gently said, "That's right. This princess came a bit too suddenly. Since there are no masters at home, this princess will see the servants. I heard that the woman Wang Yi kidnapped that day is still at home. Call her out. This princess wants to see her." While speaking, Li Helan slowly walked to the main hall. She treated this place as if it was her own palace. Xu Weiji followed behind with her head lowered. Her eyebrows twitched. As the saying goes, once or twice, but not thrice. The Princess Royal had already been rejected twice. This time, it really wasn't good to drive her out. Moreover, she didn't see Wang Yi, Old Madam, or the Old Madam when she came today. If she didn't even see Miss Qin, she would most likely explode on the spot. At that time, she really didn't know what would happen and how to deal with it. If this matter spread, it wouldn't be pleasant to hear. Xu Weiji thought of the resourceful Miss Qin and inexplicably felt a bit more confident. With her intelligence, she shouldn't be at a disadvantage. Thinking of this, Xu Weiji smiled and said, "Yes, this humble one will immediately send someone to invite Miss Qin here." Li Helan sat at the head of the table. She took the teacup brought by the servant and her hands paused for a moment. She said call her, but Xu Weiji said invite her. Could it be that this woman had a high status in the residence? Li Helan thought so, so she directly asked. Xu Weiji hurriedly bowed and said, replying to the Princess Royal, "This Miss Qin was confined in Sushui Garden by Wang Yi a few days ago. No one was allowed to come in contact with her. This humble one guesses that Wang Yi might have his own plans." Li Helan understood and nodded, but her heart ached. It seemed that the news that Xiang found out was true. This Miss Qin was as beautiful as a fairy and made Pang Xiao dizzy. He wanted to marry her, but she was the daughter of the enemy who killed his father. He loved her dearly and couldn't bear to kill her. He really loved and hated her, spoiled and abused her. His feelings were really complicated. Such strong and complicated feelings, but they weren't for her. Li Helan took a sip of tea and looked at the teacup in her hand with a smile. In fact, she was ready. When Qin Yining learned that the Princess Royal of Enyang came and Pang Xiao wasn't at home and asked to see her, he immediately ordered Xianyun, immediately send someone to Pine Crane Hall and tell Old Master, Old Madam, and Old Madam to hide and not come out, so that they won't be embarrassed when they see the Princess Royal. Just now, Mr. Shu has asked someone to send a message to Pine Crane Hall. Now the gate of Pine Crane Hall is closed, and even Dahe and Whitey are tied up. Xianyun admired Qin Yining very much. That's good. Qin Yining looked at the pearls and emeralds in her hair as she said, fortunately, we have the resourceful Mr. Shu and Mr. Xie in the Fu. When the prince is not here, there are still people who can take charge. Yes, but after you get married, it should be you who guard the mansion. Seeing that Qin Yining untied her hair, Xianyun hurriedly took a comb to comb her hair. Qin Yining blushed at her teasing. She ordered, tell them to find the clothes I wore when I returned to the city. Also, make my hair simple. I don't want any jewelry or ornaments. And use the cloak I wore when I came here. Xianyun was a smart person. She understood that Qin Yining was afraid of being noticed in front of Princess Royal of Enyang, so she immediately ordered people to do it. Qin Yining combed her hair again and put on the plain dress and the cotton cloak with the collar of white fox fur. Her hair was loosely tied into a bun. She didn't wear any jewelry or makeup and went out without any makeup. Xianyun wanted to follow her, but Qin Yining thought for a moment and said, I don't want you to. You'll be recognized. Just find 2 loyal and tall women to follow me. You're so thoughtful, miss, otherwise, you wouldn't look like a surveillance. As she said this, she called 2 women who were over 40 years old and had sturdy figures. The 2 women followed Qin Yining to the front hall as if they were escorting a criminal. At this time, Li Helan had already eaten a bowl of tea and was looking at the door, ready to fight. Li Helan couldn't help but sit up straight when she heard the sound of footsteps getting closer and closer. Someone lifted the bamboo curtain outside the door, and an old woman wearing an ochre coat came in. She leaned sideways to hold the heavy curtain for the person behind her. The first thing that came into view was a light green dress. Then, he saw a beauty draped in a snow-white fox fur coat, without any makeup, slowly walk in. Li Helan's pupils shrank. She thought she was beautiful, but now she had lost. It was just as He Xiong had heard. That cheap wench was very outstanding. If there was a woman in this dynasty who was more beautiful than her, there might be one in the common folk. However, Li Helan often attended gatherings between nobles and nobles, but she had never seen anyone who could compare to her. If the men in this dynasty were included, Ji Zheyu could compare to her in terms of facial features. This was a woman that people couldn't help but look at a few more times. She was reluctant to look away. Her actions were generous and gentle, but she was naturally charming. The jealousy in Li Helan's heart was about to burst out. Her hands that were holding the armrest behind her gradually tightened. However, the smile on her face was gentle and intimate. She blinked her long eyelashes and looked at Qin Yining with 3 parts curiosity and 7 parts amazement. Her expression was perfectly controlled and made people feel comfortable. Qin Yining came forward and bowed. She respectfully kowtowed and said, "This little girl greets Enyang eldest princess. May the eldest princess be blessed." Li Helan quickly walked forward and helped her up with both hands. She took Qin Yining's hand and said with a smile, "There is no need to be so polite. Miss Qin is really a talent. That day at the city gate, many people saw you and described you as a fairy. This princess has long wanted to make friends with you. It is rare to see you today. Ayo, what a beautiful person. You really make this princess look like a pig or a dog. Eldest princess is overpraising me." Qin Yining bowed in fear and trepidation. She said in a soft and gentle voice, "You are a golden branch and jade leaf, the bright moon in the sky. This little girl is just a weed on the side of the road. This little girl's status is lowly. How could I dare to compete with the bright moon?" Li Helan looked at Qin Yining's graceful figure and lowered head. She looked timid and her voice was low. At a glance, She looked like a well-bred girl from a large family. Her personality was also very weak. How could she be liked by Pang Xiao with this kind of personality? Li Helan smiled contemptuously, but the expression on her face became even more amiable. Don't say it like that. If we are talking about golden branches and jade leaves, isn't Miss Qin also one? In the future, when your father comes to the capital to become an official, my imperial brother will put him in an important position. Qin Yining hurriedly bowed again in fear and trepidation. Thank you, eldest princess. Thank you, your majesty. She was so cowardly and useless. She really had a good appearance. Li Helan smiled and took a flowery golden tassel from her hair. She placed it in Qin Yining's hair bun. Miss Qin's appearance is too plain. This is a little token of my appreciation. Miss Qin, please don't dislike it. Chapter 319. Oh! Li Helan asked with concern, young Miss Qin is such a gentle beauty, why would Brother Xiao ground you? Then she smiled as if she understood. She patted Qin Yining's shoulder to comfort him. His temper has been like this since he was young. He's very cold to outsiders. Don't worry, this princess will talk to Brother Xiao later and tell him not to punish you. Qin Yining heard her call him Brother Xiao and then talk about since he was young and his very cold to outsiders. He felt his teeth ache. It seemed like even though the eldest princess was engaged to Marquis Dingbei, she still had feelings for Pang Xiao. A well-mannered young lady would follow the 3 obediences and 4 virtues. This eldest princess had grown up being spoiled, so she was used to getting what she wanted. She didn't know how to accept the fact that she couldn't get what she wanted. Now that her marriage wasn't to her liking, she would work hard to fight for true love in the future. Qin Yining's heart was like a spark from a flint. He suddenly understood Your Majesty's intention in granting a marriage between eldest Princess Enyang and Ji Ziyu. Even if Ji Ziyu and Pang Zhishi were good brothers, as long as they were men, they wouldn't tolerate their wives thinking about someone else. Li Qitian was really willing to do anything to provoke these 2 people, one in the south and one in the north. He was even willing to sacrifice his little sister's lifelong happiness. Qin Yining's heart was like a bolt of lightning in a single breath. She bowed again. Her watery eyes sparkled as she said in a trembling voice, "Many thanks, eldest princess. If eldest princess can say a few good words for this little girl will be deeply grateful. I'll thank eldest princess first." Li Helan saw her face full of surprise and was so moved that she was about to cry. She was like a harmless little animal that had found food. He despised her even more in his heart, but he also lowered his guard against her. Such a delicate girl was snatched into the mansion by Pang Xiao. It was hard to tell whether he doted on her or abused her. The more such speculations and discussions there were, the worse the reputation of the Qin clan became. To Li Helan, who was a proud daughter of the heavens, Qin Yining was no longer a threat. Li Helan was too lazy to pay attention to people who posed no threat to him. He felt that it was a waste of time to talk to Qin Yining. However, Li Helan wasn't a brainless idiot. The eldest princess's noble status didn't allow her to be too impolite. Therefore, Li Helan held Qin Yining's hand and carefully instructed him on the trivial matters of life. She once again promised that she would plead for Qin Yining and that he could look for her if he needed anything. This kind of polite words were too hypocritical. Even if Qin Yining was an idiot who took polite words seriously, he probably wouldn't be able to get past the palace walls to find the eldest princess. After a short while, the eldest princess took her leave. Qin Yining respectfully went to the courtyard and kowtowed to see her off. When she left, he finally let out a sigh of relief. He didn't say anything to Shu Weiji and only nodded his head as a greeting before hurriedly returning to Shui Garden to be grounded. In the carriage, Li Helan had a mocking smile on her lips as she closed her eyes to rest. The head palace maid He Xiong was gently massaging Li Helan's legs while sizing up her master's expression. She softly said, "That Miss Qin is indeed a top-notch beauty. It's a pity that her character is too low." Chem. Li Helan lazily opened her eyes. He Xiong said, as soon as she appeared, she seduced Wang Yi out of character and even tried to snatch him in public. Rumors have already spread that Wang Yi is a hero who can't resist the charms of a beauty. Such a calm and steady hero was actually seduced by the Qin clan to the point where he doesn't care about his reputation. He's truly a hero with a short temper. He Xiong's voice was very gentle and she spoke slowly. Her tone was so soft that it was impossible for people to dislike her. Moreover, Li Helan, who was raised in the depths of the palace, was also very willing to listen to the gossip outside. However, today's rumors made her feel very uncomfortable. Li Helan's finger, which was wearing a pure gold armor, poked the handkerchief in her hand and said casually, "She has a beautiful appearance. However, as a woman, it's also a mistake to be too beautiful." Hearing this, He Xiong asked curiously, "Doesn't Princess Royal think that the Qin clan is deliberately seducing Wang Yi? She doesn't have the initiative in this matter. She's just a weak woman. What can she do? Princess Royal is just too kind." He Xiong's tone was indignant as she said, "In terms of appearance, Princess Royal is comparable to her. In terms of background, Princess Royal is the real golden branch and jade leaf. Just like what the Qin clan said, Princess Royal is the bright moon in the sky while she's just a weed on the roadside. Princess Royal is so much better than her." Wang Yi was still seduced by her. This servant is really not convinced. He Xiong's words successfully provoked the irritation and jealousy in Li Helan's heart. Everyone loved beauty. It was a fact that beautiful women were more attractive to men. There was no need to argue about this. However, her appearance was given by her parents. It was useless for her to be jealous. When she thought of how Pang Xiao avoided her and locked a beauty in his home like a bird in a golden cage, she thought of how Pang Xiao avoided her. Even if his reputation of being a lecher spread throughout the capital, he didn't hesitate to do so. It was clear that Pang Xiao had long been deeply in love with the Qin clan. Li Helan felt very wronged. Qin Shu, whom she had just met, had defeated her with only her beauty. Then what was her love for Pang Xiao all these years? When He Xiong saw Li Helan's appearance, she became even more indignant and said, "Princess Royal has a good temper, but this servant doesn't have any self-restraint. When I saw how good you were to the Qin clan, this servant wanted to rush up and give her a few big slaps on the face for you. Let's see how she can seduce Wang Yi then." For a moment, Li Helan almost ordered the coachman to return to the Wang mansion and do as He Xiong said and give the Qin Yining a few big slaps on the face. However, she closed her eyes and thought for a moment. The surging jealousy in her heart was once again suppressed. The root of this matter is not the Qin clan. It's Pang Zhishi. Pang Zhishi is an ambitious and ruthless person. Purely based on beauty, this princess can't compare to the Qin clan. However, this princess has more than enough to spare when it comes to other things. This princess believes that as time passes, he will realize how beneficial it is for him to become this princess's prince consort. But your prince consort will definitely be North placating Marquis. He Xiong's words poked Li Helan's sore spot. Li Helan took a few deep breaths and shook her head, saying, "Even if he doesn't become this princess's prince consort, he will know the benefits of following this princess." Li Helan's eyes became stern and firm as she said, "He Xiong, go back and send an invitation to the Wang mansion. This princess must see Pang Zhishi tomorrow. I don't believe that he can hide from this princess for much longer." "Yes." He Xiong respectfully replied. She could finally breathe a sigh of relief. At the same time, in a private room on the third floor of the Sparrow Tower, Jiziyu's fair and slender hand held a white porcelain wine pot. He stretched out his arm and poured a cup of wine for Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao's lips curled into a smile. He raised his cup and drank it in one gulp. When Jiziyu saw him like this, he couldn't help but smile. He also raised his head and drank his own wine. "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."